while we was in that meeting. Well, I'm hitting live because we need to. Sound recorder. Oh yeah, one sec. Sorry. See, the whole time difference has really thrown me off. I had to jump out of that meeting. Oh my god, we started 20 minutes. Hello everyone. Hopefully you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting momentarily. Sorry we are late, or technically early if you're in Europe. That is the reason why I'm running late. I need to quickly log into my email as well. You check to do for all the stories? Okay, yeah. I did that thing because I was trying out the broadcast stuff earlier in the week. Obviously, it hijacks your microphone as well. Did the mistake of yeah, and I was messing around with it, and then I just forgot I had it running in the background. So then when I went to film the 23H2 video, I'd set the mic wrong, and so I spent 20 minutes talking into nothing. No, I was so angry. Always the way. Oh, we've got another ad read. Good old indeed. Eric says, great sweater, thanks. Can you see what it is? Yeah. It's November. It's Doctor Who month. Oh, yeah, you're right. Thanks for getting the date, telling me the date's wrong in the thingy. Yeah, it's November 3rd, isn't it? It's not November 11th. There we go. I updated it. Yeah. Okay. Doing an update. I am now recording. Sorry, Dan, real quick. I need to pause you for a sec because audio is not working properly. I think NVIDIA Broadcast has messed up all my audio. Hang on. Sorry. Oh, dear. Can you say some words now? Oh, good. No, that didn't work either. Hang on. What are the default speakers on here? This is going to have to take a minute. We might have to start again. Yeah. Sorry. Audio. Let's see here. Default speakers. If you say some. Actually, wait. Say something now. Oh, goodness. Why not? Why isn't that working? How can I hear you but the system can't? Yeah, NVIDIA broadcasters messed me up. I'm going to have to restart my computer. All right. So the broadcast will stop for a minute, but it was. Oh, everything stopped moving around. There we go. Hello. Hopefully you can hear us and see us. We're back, and Dan's audio is not working, so we can start again when you're ready, Dan.
Let's see. I am now recording.
I am now recording.
3, 2, 1, clap. Hold on. I forgot I actually did clap. I gotta say clap. I forgot. 3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 331 for November 3rd, 2023. Hey everyone, Dean and Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. This week we'll be talking about Windows 11 news, of course, including that 23H2 is now live. We'll talk about what that means in relation to everything else. Surface support by Microsoft is updated to 6 years. And NVIDIA and AMD apparently are going to ARM. We'll talk about what that means and what NVIDIA could be doing there and whether or not I think AMD may be successful. Finally, we'll wrap up with the Snapdragon X Elite and Apple M3, which we'll be talking about because I was in Hawaii last week and a lot of news has come out since. And there's a lot of context I want to give around what Qualcomm is doing along with Apple. But we'll get to that in a little bit. For now, Zach, how are you doing today? Besides the fact that you delayed the podcast because of your shenanigans with NVIDIA Broadcast. Speaking of NVIDIA, I've never had an issue with it. I get it's for those who don't know, NVIDIA Broadcast is a free app that if you have an RTX video card, allows you to manipulate your the camera, your microphone, and your speakers to filter out noise or blur the background or do the gaze correction stuff, which is kind of neat. But what it's doing, of course, it acts as a middleman between whatever application you're using and your hardware and Windows. And so there is room there for stuff to get messed up. You have to go into the app, choose your camera, into broadcast, choose your camera, set it, choose the right resolution and FPS, because that might affect things too. And then you got to go to Skype and then select NVIDIA Broadcast as your new camera versus your old camera. So it's a little tricky. For some reason, Zach had an issue with the audio. I'm sure he'll figure it out eventually, but
Yep.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
hopefully NVIDIA Broadcast will eventually be built into Windows at some point or something analogous
Yeah,
to it.
that would be nice. Obviously, with the AI stuff up and coming with NPUs and stuff, hopefully that becomes a reality. But yeah, right now I tried it out earlier and it seemed to work fine earlier. But the second I wanted to put it into production, it didn't work. Like I could hear Dan fine, but the streaming app couldn't, and I don't know why. Tried to restart, still the same problem. I had to uninstall NVIDIA Broadcast to get the audio to come back. So I'm guessing there was an issue with channels or selecting the right source or something. I don't know, but I'd have to figure it out another day. But other than that stressful start to the podcast, I am doing okay. How are you?
Hanging in there, a lot of travel. I got to watch my dogs now. I don't know what they're going to do next. I might have to let them out to the backyard. But yeah, no, a lot of travel. Obviously, Hawaii, 12 hours to, 12 hours
That's
back, there
wild.
for 3 days. So, ride Monday night, left Thursday night. It's a good event. Nice running into a lot of my old friends and colleagues at this job. It's always fun to catch up to them and have some good conversations. And obviously, Qualcomm had some pretty big announcements, which we'll touch on later. That was very exciting. And then I went to New York City last night for Lenovo. They had their Lenovo Legion Go launch party, and so I came home with one. For those who don't recall, the Legion Go is basically their brand new handheld gaming PC, analogous to the Asus ROG Ally or Rogue Ally, but it's also different. I was giving Lenovo a lot of credit here. They didn't just make the same thing. Sure, they made the display bigger, but they also brought some new features. Like, for instance, you can separate the side controllers from the device itself, a la Nintendo Switch. But instead of like plugging it into your TV, which of course you could do if you wanted to, you can then this thing has a kickstand built into it. So you just pop out the kickstand, set it on your table, and not only can you play it with the two joysticks like that, there's what's called an FPS mode, which is where you take the right one and it sets down on the table, and it's like a weird combo mouse flight stick design. And so it's good for first person shooters where you need that sort of movement. Like if you ever do an FPS shooter, you use a mouse and a keyboard. This kind of simulates that versus using a thumb pad, which of course you could do as well. I haven't tried any of it yet. I just opened it because I've been so busy. They also gave us their new glasses, Legion glasses, they call them. I've talked about these previously. Lenovo announced these at CES last year. Or actually, beginning of this year, I should say. These are what I've been talking about for a long time, where they just have a single Type-C plug, and you just plug them into basically anything, and it's just going to acts as a display. So Windows sees it as a secondary display. Your phone will see it as an external display, and it just outputs whatever you're seeing into the glasses, but using prisms, so it's like a virtual display. And it's a pretty big. I think it's like 110 inches and like what would look like in real world. That just floats, and it's kind of opaque, and you can kind of still see through things and all that kind of jazz. There's the other company, InReal had these, and Real Air. Now they're rebranded to XReal, and they came out with XReal 2, which Dak had a write up of last week, and I have a pair of those too, and they're actually phenomenal. I'm going to compare those because these are really interesting technologies. The benefit of this stuff is you plug it into, say, the Legion Go or your ROG Ally or your Steam Deck. It creates a secondary display, but it turns off the display then on your device. And then you just have what you see with the glasses. So you could be gaming in public. Not only will you have a bigger display, a virtual one, but no one can see what you're doing. It's also cool to use on a laptop for that reason as well, because you could be on an airplane working on sensitive material. You just put these glasses on. No one knows what you're up to. They even have speakers just above the ears built into the frames. And these are weird. This is like a new technology a couple of companies are using because like it's not bone conducting, but like if someone is wearing these, technically the speakers are exposed, but you can't hear what is coming out unless like you put your ear up to theirs, which of course might be a little odd if you're going to do that in the public. But only you really hear it. And the audio is actually really good. It's just the spatial separation is really nice. So they gave us those as well. So we'll be putting those through their paces. I'm excited about this technology. I think it's really cool. I tried gaming with like the XReal 2s and various gaming devices, and it's a very different kind of awesome experience. Like the XReals, and I think these two probably have they have a cover you can kind of put on. The XReal 2s you can still see through, so it's more like a sunglasses. Previously, it was a complete blackout. So you put them on, it was like VR glasses. Now you can't see your real world, but the new ones now I think just black out things. And so like you can really kind of get that full experience. It's also really good for watching movies on. So again, if you're on an airplane and you want to watch a movie, you can have your own personal movie theater. What's great about these devices though is the cost. These are, I don't know what Lenovo's charging. They're between $300 and $350. I don't think they go up to 400 even. So it's like way cheaper than most anything else. And what I love about them is the simplicity of it. It's just a Type-C cable. Like I say, you just plug it into anything and it'll just work. You can even use it on your iPhone. You'll need an adapter. Oh, although I guess with the new iPhones you don't. You just plug it in and it just works. And that's it. It does the one thing. It creates a virtual display in front of you. And it's like there's no software you need. There's no, you can control the brightness and the volume of it, but that's about it. It's
But
just
there is software for the X-Rails. We're talking about the X-Rails, right?
You don't need it.
Yeah, you don't
Right.
need it.
So
but the software can enhance the experiences. You can add more virtual desktops and stuff, which is quite incredible, I think.
Yeah, I haven't even tried that yet. They also have this thing called Beam, and you can make the display bigger or smaller.
Yeah.
You can also pin the screen like HoloLens. So you can like pin it in your field of view. You can look over in the corner, pin the screen there, and then look away, and you'll just see your room normally. But then when you look back, you'll see the screen still floating there. Yeah, so that does have some advanced AR technology, actual AR stuff, which is actually pretty wild. So we'll be covering more of that stuff. In the coming weeks. I think this is really exciting technology, and like I said, it's purpose driven. You don't really need to ask what it does or do you need it. You either know you need it or you don't, right? Like if do you want a game with glasses on and have a giant OLED display in front of you, like virtual, then give these a shot. They've really improved in the quality. I haven't tried Lenovo's yet, but I can tell you the X-Real 2s, the quality is really nice. In fact, there's the X-Real 2 Pros, right? Is that what they're called? That have a you have the technology in them. Like I was talking about how you can slap on this like black cover to really darken it out. The pros, which they didn't send for reviews, I don't know if they're out yet. I don't think they are, have the ability to via software darken the lenses
Hmm.
to three different stages. And so you can just do it on the glasses. I think you just like hit the button
Yeah.
and it'll darken the lens for you, which is wild. Like no one's done that yet. Like that's
Uh-huh.
some new technology. Cool stuff. More coming up on that soon, though. But yeah, the Legion Go should be an interesting device to go up against the ROG Ally. That's its real competition, as well as Steam Deck. But these two are Windows devices where Steam Deck runs Linux, although technically you can install Windows on it if you would like. We'll see how they are. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm going to be playing around with it this weekend. Anywho, though, let's get to the what's it? The bread and butter here of the podcast, the Windows 11 stuff. 23H2 now official. Zach, walk us through this weird update we've had this year from Microsoft, and whether or not we might actually have something like this again.
So yeah, 23H2 is now technically available, and I say technically because it's still something you have to go and get. It's not something that's just going to automatically arrive on your PC. I don't think the version updates have ever been that way. The only time that happens is if you're currently running a version of Windows that's now no longer in support, and then you automatically get offered the latest version update. But everyone on 22H2 right now is still technically supported for at least another year, maybe a bit longer. So you won't get this by default. You do need to go into Windows Update and ensure the Git actually what's it called? Yeah, get the latest updates as soon as they're available setting is switched to on. If that's on, then the update will appear and you'll be able to install it. If that's not on, it just won't show. So keep that in mind. But yeah, regarding the 23H2 release itself, what is it? What does it include? Why is it the way it is? The 23H2 update is Microsoft's commitment to refreshing the support cycle of Windows. Every fall, there is a new version of Windows shipped. Version 23H2 this year. Last year was version 22H2. The year before, 21H2. There's always an annual fall update of some kind. Some years they are bigger than others. This year's update is technically very, very small because all of the features that were originally for it were delivered a few weeks ago via an optional preview update for version 22H2. So 23H2 was sort of left out in the cold with none of the new features. That said, it does have technically two additional things that are exclusive to it that weren't in that preview update for 22H2. The first one is system components in the start menu now when you're scrolling through the list. Apps that are technically inbox apps that you can't uninstall, those will now have a system label underneath them, and there's even an area in the settings app now where you can go and see all the system components. And then the other thing is, it escapes me. Oh yes, it's the Teams chat stuff. So Teams chat was updated with 23H2, and by updated I mean removed. They've taken out the integrated sort of flyout that the taskbar had with Windows 11. Teams chat, Windows 11 chat is no more. That said, Teams Consumer is still pinned to the taskbar by default, and when you click on it, you will get a similar sort of flyout interface, but it's no longer part of the OS. It's now hosted 100% in the Teams app, which means if you go in and uninstall the Teams client that comes pre-installed with Windows, that goes away, and the option to enable or disable Teams chat in the taskbar disappears with it. So those are the only two notable things with 23H2. Everything else, all the other stuff, Windows Copilot, all of those snipping tool improvements, AI in Paint, this, that, and the other, that was all technically 22H2 stuff. But if you haven't downloaded and installed that 22H2 optional update, because right now it is still optional, 23H2 will be the first time you experience all of those new features. So 23H2 essentially acts as a cumulative update. for everything that was delivered to Windows 11 over the last year. By default, it's all in there. It's all pre-installed. It's all enabled by default. So if you want to just get all the new features now, don't have to wait for that optional security preview update. Just go ahead, download 23H2, and you will have all those new features when you restart. So that's super nice. The 23H2 update is delivered as an enablement package, just like Windows 10 feature updates have been over the last few years. That's different from how 22H2 and 21H2 were shipped. Those were major versions of the Windows platform. The reason why 23H2 isn't is because of Moments. Microsoft moved to this new engineering cycle where new versions of the Windows platform ship every 3 years, and in between we get moment updates. And so that's why 23H2 is an enablement package, because the next version of the Windows platform isn't due until 2024, codenamed Germanium or Germanium, one of those two. So that's why 23H2 is what it is. It's a minor update based on the Nickel platform release, because the next platform release isn't due until next year. So those are the sort of TLDRs for the 23H2 update. It's been a confusing one. Here at Windows Central, we've had debates as to what to call these updates, because obviously originally this fall's release was 23H2 and we could have just called it the 2023 update and be done with it. But then Microsoft chose to ship 95% of the features that were planned for this release before 23H2 began rolling out. And because that ended up being a moment updates don't technically have names, so we've been scrambling as to what to call this update in headlines and stuff for SEO purposes and whatnot. It's just nobody knows what to call it. We began calling it the September 26th update, then we ended up calling it the October update, and now I think we're just going to finally settle on 23H2 or the 2023 update, as Microsoft calls its friendly name. So that's it. That's all you need to know about 23H2. Of course, next year is going to be quite interesting with the next sort of Windows platform release on the way in Hudson Valley. We'll see how things go about that. I'm already starting to hear that there are some changes to the roadmap, Windows roadmap taking place. So that's a conversation we might be able to have at a later date. But as of right now, I think the plan is we get another moment update in February for Windows 11. Then we get the Windows Hudson Valley / Germanium release in the summer or sort of late summer. And then we'll see what happens beyond then, whether or not we continue with Moments or if something changes. So, yeah, that's the TLDR. Dan, are you running 23H2 now that it's out?
Maybe.
Are you on the release preview? Because if you are, then you probably are.
Yeah, I'm on release preview. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. I'm on, let's see. Oops. Yeah, 23H2. Yeah, because I remember the update came through, I think, like a few days ago or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fine. It's been running great. I can't tell the difference between it and, like, anything else, from the last September and October updates. Outside of the fact that, like, Paint now does have the Copilot, co-creator thing in there for, it has all that kind of stuff, which is nice. The store we talked about the last podcast that I was on is much faster now due to some updates, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice update overall. I think the biggest thing is the Copilot, which I actually do use more than I thought I would, mostly because I'm asking it just kind of like, pretty specific questions. Like last night, this is really kind of a dumb example, but this is like what I like this AI stuff for. So I was flying home from New York to Boston, and I don't know if anybody else does that. Sometimes, I don't really watch a lot of movies, especially on a 40-minute flight. Like people are firing up movies. And I saw someone like in my line of view, in front of me, they're watching a movie. And I remember seeing this movie, but my brain just completely wiped any memory of it outside of just like some recall. And I was like, what the hell are they watching? I'm like, what's the name of that? And they paused it once. I could almost read it. I was like, oh, yeah. So I just asked AI. It was like, what was it? I asked it, what movie was Ryan Gosling and Kevin Bacon in? That was it. And it immediately responded. It was just like, oh, that's a
but if I was sitting next to you, Dan, I could have told you that.
Yeah, but you weren't. And so, but yeah, you can ask it questions like that are so vague. Now, if you put that to a search engine, yeah, you probably eventually, you probably land on a page maybe, but it was cool to get like, not just the answer, but it gave me the whole thing. It was like, oh, there's a movie called Crazy Sexy or Stupid Crazy Love, whatever, 2011, and here's who it starred, and this is how much money it made. And it was just like, it did it on the first shot within seconds. And it was just like that kind of vague stuff, You can ask it questions like medical questions, like, is there a name for this kind of condition or this kind of
Hmm.
thing? And it's like, yeah, here we go. It's like, I knew there would be a name for that. So I use that stuff frequently for that. So those aren't necessarily search things, although search can kind of do that. But the answer it gives you, it's just way more useful because it's not a web page you then have to go to and click an ad or scroll down. It's just like, no, this is your answer right there in front of you. Here are the links to it if you want to go read more. And then, of course, it gives you even suggestions for other questions to ask if you'd like to pursue it. So I actually really, really like this. I think the implementation could be improved, and I'm sure it will be. We've talked about the weird how it slides out. You argued, and I agree here, that the reason it pops out like that is because you're supposed to be able to use it while you're like using another application or something like that. And it pops out as like almost like a snapped window,
Hmm.
and then it goes away when you're done. I think some of that can still be improved a little bit. Obviously, speed I think is still it's gotten better. I think I feel sometimes it's faster than other times, but when I pay for a Chat GPT 3.5 and I use an app called Easy Chat AI, which is in the Microsoft Store, and I put in my API token, like ChatGPT, when you pay for it, is like stupid fast. Like you just hit that enter button and immediately starts answering. It's like it's so bizarre. Like you can ask it to like rewrite like 5 paragraphs and it'll just do it. Like it takes seconds. It's really kind of mind blowing. And when I say I paid for it, I think over a 3-month period of using it pretty regularly, not necessarily heavily, but regularly, it cost me 53 cents. So it's not like I'm paying for it, right? So it's cool technology. I can't wait to see kind of more of this stuff. And as we've mentioned the last time with NPUs, this stuff we'll have localized versions of this,
Hmm.
localized large language models on our PCs pretty soon. They won't even need to reach out to the internet for that stuff, or it could reach out for just little bits of that answer it needs. So I think it's all cool stuff.
Yeah, me too. I'm very excited. The stuff you mentioned about Copilot there, its implementation, I fully agree, is a little jank right now. I think it's kind of odd how it pushes things over. It makes sense that it should be treated as like a sidebar rather than an overlay, because obviously if you're using it in conjunction with an app, you want to be able to fully see all the content of that app still versus a bit of it being
Yeah.
sort of obscured. But you're right. I feel like the implementation of it does feel a little undercooked. I think hopefully with the Hudson Valley release coming next year, they improve that. I have heard that they might be working on like an improved sort of Copilot interface, and I'm hoping that just sort of results in a better implementation. Because right now you're right, it just feels like it snaps out. Is there even an animation to it when you click it? That kind of is. It's a real okay. It's very laggy
Yeah.
the animation, but yeah, I don't know about you, Dan, but when you close it, when you hit the X on it, does it like take a second to actually go away? You hit X and then it's like 1, 2, okay, close. Because it does for me. It's so annoying.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I still had the issue where it's not supposed to, but it pushes the window out of the way sometimes.
Yeah.
If I have a window snapped and it pushes it out of the way, and then when you exit out,
It doesn't bring it
it
back.
goes back. It doesn't bring it back.
Yeah, it
Sometimes
forgets.
but it only will do that. Let's see. It just did it. Yeah, it didn't. So it does it on the first try, and then when you do it again, it's fine.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's about. But
That's what I'm saying. The implementation is kind of janky. I think they still need to work on it and stuff. Because remember, technically it's an Edge feature. It's not a Windows feature. At least right now, I'm hoping with the next version of Windows, they actually build a native Windows version. But I guess that's probably unlikely. But yeah, you're right. Right now, it's just basically Edge. And it's the integration between the Edge browser and Windows when it handles this stuff clearly isn't fully thought out just yet. So yeah, that's the Windows news of the week. There were a few insider builds this week, I believe. Let's see, what have I missed here? Oh yes, so the insider build stuff, real quick, was just the most notable thing that I saw is Microsoft is removing the Movies and TV app from Windows 11 as a default pre-installed app. This is in the latest Canary build, which means it's likely going to be for the next version of Windows 11 or Hudson Valley, whatever it's called. But what this simply means is when you set up a new PC with the Hudson Valley release preloaded, the Movies and TV app will no longer be there in the start menu. It's still available in the Microsoft Store. You can still go there and download it if it's something you use on the regular basis. But obviously, this is quite concerning for lots of people because obviously, if it's no longer an inbox app, then it's quite significantly demoted as a service that Microsoft offers, I think. That said, the Microsoft still heavily promotes movies and TV content, and that ties in directly with this app. The app is essentially just a vehicle for watching the content you buy on Microsoft Store, and Microsoft Store is still pinned to the taskbar by default. It's still obviously pre-installed in Windows, and when you click on it, it still advertises movies and TV content quite heavily. So I don't think anybody was suddenly randomly discovering movies and TV through the movies and TV app. I think quite literally it was being used as a library for stuff you've already paid for, and so it no longer being in Windows isn't a big deal. You can just go in and download it if you need it.
It's a weird decision, though.
Yeah, I fully agree. I don't know why. Like, was there a meeting where they were like, we need to reduce the size of Windows? what do we do?
Like, if you have that meeting, like, how big? Let's see. I don't know. Let me look it up. How big is that app? Because I don't think it's a big app.
I'm wondering if maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I cannot think of a legitimate reason to remove it from the inbox image other than to save space. But are they really grasping at megabytes for this? Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like, it is.
What sucks too is I can already hear people like, "Oh, here we go. They're going to start phasing out movies and TV again." You know, like everything else. But every time I've talked to them about that, I'm reminded, and I'll remind people here, it's a completely different business model than what, the music, Music Pass was, or whatever, Groove. It's a completely different business model. That model, you had to pay, Microsoft had to pay up front to have access to an entire library of music. And then they had to make that back with people subscribing, paying a monthly fee then to have access to that. And it was like all or nothing kind of. That's how it works. It's all or nothing, right? And people weren't really buying music, right? So that wasn't really a thing. But with movies and rentals, it's a one-to-one transaction. You see a movie, you hit rent, and you pay $3.99, and that's the end of that transaction. There's no, upfront cost really Microsoft needs to have here. It's a lot cheaper. And same thing with, buying movies, and you have the sales, and of course with Movies Anywhere and all this kind of stuff. So it's a very different model than a subscription-based one where you need a certain threshold of people to be subscribers to maintain the cost-benefit ratio that they're putting out there and renting that entire library and having access to it. And the fact is, and it shouldn't be too surprising, if you have an Xbox and you want to rent a movie, like that's pretty much the app. You can do it through Vudu. And you have Hulu and Netflix and that kind of thing. But the most convenient thing is to go through Microsoft's Movies and TV. They have that right there with the store. They can run their own ads and all that kind of stuff. And it's like one click, buy and watch. Google has the same thing too. There is a question about on your laptop or your desktop PC, are you using that app often? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't think they made it. Again, I don't know the move here. What's the benefits? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
According I don't see what any benefits.
The settings app, the Movies and TV app is 20.9 megabytes. So if they're looking to save
it's a shell of an app. Yeah. It just brings down the list of all the movies you own or ones that you want to rent, but the ones you want to rent then get handed off through the store anyway. So
maybe the thinking or the plan is for them to
integrate it into the store
or into the media player app, because there's technically a separate media player app right now, and so maybe the idea is they'll just, when you click rent on the Microsoft Store, instead of taking you to Movies and TV, it will just open up the media player and just begin playing it there. But then you can't see your library, right? Like the idea is that when I open the Movies and TV app,
they could.
I guess they could.
There is literally. I just opened the media player because I never open the media player, which is funny. I do open Movies and TV a lot. But there is literally a section called Video Library.
Yeah,
right?
I just see that. Yeah, maybe they'll add it to that then. I'd be okay with that because I like the media player app. I think it looks a lot nicer than the Movies and TV app. But it's a movies. You just watch you're watching movies. You're looking at the interface the whole time. So I don't know.
Yeah. It's got a play button. It's like I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But like I said, I don't think they're going to. I know people want to, it's Microsoft. I'm pretty positive they're not going to get rid of Movies and TV just because, as I mentioned, it's a different business model than everything they've had before. There's no like overhead costs really for them in this to maintain it either. It's not like building Windows Phone with hardware.
I think it's a pretty big business on Xbox, right? Lots of people use their Xbox as more than just a games console. They use it as a media consumption device as well. And
that was the original reason I bought it. I bought it it was the only device that had Netflix streaming. which
That's right.
was brand new when it came out. And so I bought it literally just for that because I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And you can just click and watch a movie. Like that's what I want to do instead of waiting for the DVD. So I bought it for that. And then I also, ended up using it to watch UFC because it was one of the few ways you could do UFC pay-per-views. That was
That's
super
right.
easy. Um, and then for me, playing games was just like a side bonus. Like, okay, maybe I'll play a couple games here and there. But that's literally why I did it, was for the media stuff. Now I went back to a Google Chromecast, a stick, because it's smaller and technically it was a little bit faster to use. And now I'm sure an Xbox Series X will probably be faster than that, but I haven't gotten the Series X yet. So
Also, that's quite a bit
yeah.
more power hungry versus.
Yeah, than a stick that you just plug in, right?
Yeah.
But like Google, so I do like using YouTube TV, and YouTube TV integrates obviously better into Google's thing,
Right.
but um, it's just I don't know. I like kind of Google system there for that kind of stuff, but I'll probably eventually go back to an Xbox at some point.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, so that's it for the Windows stuff.
Pretty much. Yep. Pretty boring week, I think, for Windows news.
Fair enough. Tell us about Microsoft updating the Surface firmware support for 6 years. What does that
Yeah,
actually mean?
so this sort of went under the radar, I think, by most people. But Microsoft has updated its documentation around firmware updates and supporting Surface PCs. Originally, the idea was, why is this blocked? Come on, can you go on with it? Originally, Microsoft, the documentation would sort of state that Surface PCs get 4 years of firmware updates from launch day. So if a Surface launched in January 1st, 2015, it would get firmware updates for 4 years ending January 1st, 2019 or 2020, one of the two. That has often mostly been the case for most Surface PCs. There have been exceptions and continue to be exceptions where a Surface device gets an extended support timeframe for a number of reasons. Anything from business customers are asking for it to it's taking us a really long time to ship a successor, so we're going to extend the support cycle for firmware updates a couple extra years. However, earlier this year, it looks like Microsoft actually updated its policy across the board, which now says starting January 1st, 2021, all Surface PCs shipping after that date will now have 6 years of firmware updates. So that's 2 additional years over the 4 years that Surface PCs were allowed or given by default prior to January 1st, 2021. So if you bought a Surface Laptop 4, you get now 6 years, because originally when the Surface Laptop 4 launched, it was 4 years, because at the time Microsoft was still committed to that 4-year cycle. Only this year have they sort of grandfathered devices, as well as obviously new devices coming next year, up to 6 years. So anything Surface Laptop 4, Surface Laptop Studio 1, Surface Pro 8, Surface Pro X SQ2 or whatever it is, all of those devices that shipped in 2021 onwards now get 6 years of support, which is fantastic. This is very similar to sort of what Google has announced with Pixel, with 7 years of support, and I think Apple technically don't have a number, but they support their devices for quite a while as well. Now, to be clear, there are differences between firmware updates and OS updates, of course. Firmware updates are essentially, to simplify it, they're driver updates. They improve, or sometimes not improve, the integration, the closeness between the device and the operating system. So a firmware update can bring battery life improvements or performance improvements, and can sometimes even enable additional features if a new version of Windows adds something that your hardware is technically capable of, but wasn't at the time of release. But that's not the same as OS updates. So technically an OS update can be shipped to your device even if it's out of support of firmware updates. But a firmware update is usually quite handy because they can tie off any sort of bugs or last minute issues that an outdated driver may cause with a newer version of Windows. So it's always good to be in support with firmware updates, but it's not the end of the world if you're not. So, the Surface Pro 3, I think, or maybe the Surface Pro 4, that hasn't received firmware updates in years, but you can still, technically, if you want to, force Windows 11 to install into it, and it works mostly okay. So keep that in mind. For that, there is a difference between firmware and OS updates, but the firmware updates, I think it shows a commitment to the hardware line, right? Or at least ideally it does. This idea that, Microsoft has extended the support cycle from 4 years to 6 years. That's 2 additional years of firmware updates, which means 2 additional years of driver improvements, performance improvements, battery life improvements, etc., on whatever version of Windows you have, or if there are newer versions of Windows down the pipe, improvements to make your device work better on that latest OS release as well. So I think it's good news. Kind of a sucky if you're on an older Surface PC shipped before 2021, because you don't get grandfathered into this. So you're still going to get 4 years. That said, there are exceptions to this, as I mentioned. Like the Surface Studio 2, which shipped in 2018, has 5 years of firmware updates. And I think this comes back to the fact that the reason for that is because they took so long to ship a successor, so they kind of had no choice but to extend the support cycle for it. But then other devices, like I think the Surface Pro 6 or the Pro 7 are only getting 4. Like you get 4 and you're done, versus the Pro 5, which is getting 7 years. The Pro 5 is getting 7 years of firmware updates. That's longer than the new commitment of 6 years. The reason for it is businesses. Lots and lots of businesses bought into the Surface Pro 5. It was the version within LTE specifically that I think a lot of enterprises bought into. And so that's why Microsoft has supported that device for so long. If you remember as well, the Pro 5, you could buy the Pro 5 brand new up until I think the Surface Pro 7 Plus was shipped, which is wild. That device was on sale for so many years. It was Microsoft's business sort of offering at the time. Which is a real shame because the Pro 5 is the last Surface Pro that shipped with a dual-core processor. The Pro 6 onward were the quad-core ones, which was a massive jump in performance. But yeah, so the Pro 5, I think, will be supported until... Actually, I've got the list here. Let's see. The Surface Pro 5 will be supported until January 15, 2024. So it's got less than a year to go at this point. But yeah, so if you're a Surface user, you can go to this documentation website. You can just type into Bing or Google Surface firmware support cycle. You'll come up to a Microsoft documentation site, and in there it will give you a list of all the Surface devices ever shipped and when they are set to run out of firmware support. There are some weird additions on here or choices that have been made. Like the Pro X, the Surface Pro X is on here 2 or 3 times. Yeah, they've got Surface Pro X SQ1, Surface Pro X SQ2, and Surface Pro X Wi-Fi. And that's because obviously those were all launched at different times. The SQ1 was released a year before the SQ2, which was released a year before the Wi-Fi. Except Surface Pro X Wi-Fi ships with both SQ1 and SQ2 chips, yet the Wi-Fi model gets support until 2027 versus the SQ2 and the SQ1, which only gets support until 2025. So if you bought a Surface Pro X with LTE, you only get supported until 2025. But if you bought a Surface Pro X with Wi-Fi, you get 3 additional years of support until 2027. That makes no sense. And is very unfair if they actually end up going with that. I think maybe this documentation is wrong about that. I don't know, but... Yeah,
all 10 people are going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Who's going to own that device in 2025 anyway?
I don't know. The Pro X, I think the Pro X is still the best Surface Pro from a design perspective. I think a lot of people who bought a Pro X in 2020, 2021 probably would like to keep using theirs for at least a few more years.
Curious. Be interesting to poll that, but yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this, Dan? Do you think this is good news, bad news?
I mean, it's good news, right? Any extra support and firmware and all that kind of stuff, I think is good news. It's the trend in the industry. Google's making waves with that. Apple's been giving good support for, updates as well. So, yeah, you're right. But there's the OS thing. But, even that, you can get around it and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, you can't get mad at them for doing this. It's better.
The pessimist side in me does wonder if this is actually technically a bad sign for Surface going forward. Obviously, on the surface, it looks great, but the pessimist in me sees this as Microsoft
because they're going to fade out the Surface devices.
The idea is maybe they're planning to reduce how often they update the hardware, and so to keep customers happy, they're going to increase the support cycle so that the Surface Pro, for example, is often more or less updated annually, right? Adding maybe every 14, 18 months at most. This year was the first year we didn't get a Surface Pro refresh in a handful of years. It's not never happened before, but most of the time we get a new Surface Pro almost every year. Maybe they're planning to not do that anymore. Maybe it'll be every 2 years or every 18 months. And if that's the case, then I think this is a shame because I obviously I get it. most people aren't buying a new PC every year. I mean, I'm not buying a new PC every year as well. But the idea that Surface is remaining current with the latest technology, I think, is important. And Surface already gets slanted quite a bit for shipping outdated hardware, shipping like a last gen CPU or a display that doesn't have an anti-reflective coating or missing USB-C or something like that, right? There's always something with a new Surface device that's missing out on the latest tech. And if they're going to reduce how often they're shipping new hardware, that's only going to be magnified and exemplified as I think time goes on. Because if they only release a Surface Pro, if they released a Surface Pro 10 this fall with Intel 13th gen, but then didn't release another Surface Pro until 2025, end of 2025, that would be ridiculous because it's going to miss out on Snapdragon X Elite, Intel 14th gen, and all this other stuff, right? So I'm hoping this isn't what that is. I'm hoping they're just extending the support cycles because they love their customers and they love Surface. But I guess we'll see what the real reason behind this is at some point soon. Because if we do see, because we are expecting a new Pro and laptop next year, if we don't get another one in 2025, then I think this is a sign that they're actually planning to reduce how often they ship new hardware. And I think that would be a real shame.
Yep, that is the cynical view of it.
Yes.
It might not be wrong because, like, without Panos there, and we saw things kind of slowing down a little bit with Surface, and you and I both admit that the product line has been not that great for the last couple of years. It's not terrible, but it's gotten old. The Surface Pro 9 launch was a little weird. It had some different colors. That limited edition thing that was impossible to find. But yeah, I don't know. It's I wouldn't be surprised. But then again, I've always said that, like, first of all, I do think the Surface division, as much as I love them, did overextend. I think going into accessories, which while cool, probably unnecessary. I get the appeal of it though. You ideally, if you're really like your Surface laptop, yeah, maybe you want a Surface mouse and a Surface headphones. That kind of makes sense. But at the end of the day, Microsoft is not a hardware company. And, they would have to, extending yourself to that many products, you have to be able to bring in all that money and be like, okay, now we're going to be a hardware company, right? If you're only making 2 or 3 types of PCs, which is what they did for years. I mean, specifically, it was a Surface Pro for just many, many years, and then came a Surface laptop. Actually, which came first, Surface laptop or Surface Book came first, right?
Surface Book came first, yeah.
Yeah, then they did Surface Book, and then and even when Surface Laptop came out, everybody was kind of like, "What are you guys doing? Like, why are you making a laptop now? Like, we got the other two; those were like groundbreaking, innovative, new form factors, but laptop." But to their credit, a Surface Laptop was really amazing at the time. There was nothing like it. It was just it was beautiful. But since then, as I keep iterating, HP, Dell, Lenovo have just been crushing it with amazing consumer devices out there, to the extent that it's been harder to recommend Surface over them. I mean, it's actually, unless you just need the Surface Pro, that's kind of the only one. Surface Laptop Studio, I would say, it's still easy to recommend if you need what it does specifically, which I've said most people don't. But if you're an engineer or an artist and you need that easel mode with a GPU, there's no other device like it on the planet. But I think a lot of people look at it like, oh, that would be cool to have. And it is cool to have, but it's also an expensive tool that you probably don't need and would be better spending your money elsewhere. But, you look at like HP Spectre series, Dell's XPS line, you look at Lenovo's Yoga line, and of course, and then even the business laptops have gotten really good too. Consumers can buy ThinkPads, and a lot of people love those things. I've argued for years that the HP's EliteBooks are some of my favorite devices, and those are, business. So it's been kind of made up, for that, and I think that's fine. The PC industry is healthy because of that. But we do want Microsoft to sort of be the tip of the spear a lot of times on this stuff. And if they're going to step back from that, that could be an issue.
Yeah, I do hope their more concise portfolio does result in more quality over quantity at this point. Because I think, it's been said many times, but Microsoft, sometimes the Surface line, certain product lines in the Surface portfolio sort of stagnate in regards to design. Like the Surface Pro 5 through 7 Plus, let's be honest, not much was going on there. A new chip every year, maybe a slightly curved design on the Pro 6. Oh no, the Pro 5 introduced that. So the design more or less remained the same between Pro 5 and Pro 7. And they were making minor changes to things, and they finally added the USB-C port and stuff. But that was 3-4 years of no innovation really in regards to how you use a Surface Pro. And maybe that's the result of as you mentioned, the Surface line sort of being spread too thin. They're doing too many different things. They're making keyboards, they're making headphones now. They're trying to make a dual screen phone. It's like maybe you're right. Maybe they should have just kept to the core products: the Pro, the book, the laptop, and the studio.
They should have.
I still think they should do the studio.
Surface Pro, Surface Laptop. They should still make just Surface Laptop Pro.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree.
It's just slightly thicker with a GPU.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then keep the Goes.
Yeah.
Because the Goes do sell well.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I think I'd like to see. I'd like
to come up with some new innovation.
I'd like to see them do like a Mac Mini device as well, because obviously they've got the Windows Dev Kit, which is technically a Surface product, just not branded Surface. I'd like them to turn that into a consumer Surface thing, make it metal versus plastic, and call it a day. That would be great. That's the only other thing I want to see. They can kill off the Surface Studio. Don't get me wrong, I love the Surface Studio desktop.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's too expensive. It's too underpowered.
It didn't have the impact on the industry. You saw Lenovo make their own kind of version of it.
Yeah.
But it's not something I see as like having taken off and like really changed the way people work. I'd be curious for people who own that device, who need that device for work, how they feel about it. We kind of don't have data on that. I feel like they could get rid of those. And even a laptop studio, I think it's just like one of the, I've said it's like the quintessential Windows 11 PC, because it highlights everything that the OS is capable of, and what Windows is kind of capable of, except for the 5G part. It's also a laptop that most people technically don't need, because of the pricing, and most people don't need that screen that comes down flat, to turn it into a 4.3-pound tablet, right? It's it's a big tablet. You're not going to like use that as a like an iPad, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. We'll see what happens with them. But the PC industry, healthier than ever in a lot of ways, or rather, it technically has hit rock bottom. So, in terms of sales, but that's post-pandemic. Apple's struggling here too, by the way. They had sales with a MacBook for a while grow with the M1 series, but it's slowed down with M2. And you even hear it now. You see a lot of people saying, like, who own the M1. Marquez Brownlee said this. He's like, I have an M1. He said the only reason he wants the new M3 is because they made that matte space black version. Has nothing to do with the performance. It's just that the new color variant is like something he really kind of digs. And, that's the only reason. Because the performance on the M1 has been so good. I've said this for a while, that, the problem with Apple has kind of two problems here. They made the chip so good that people do not feel the need to upgrade, especially since M1 was such a leap, but M2 and M3 now are not that leap. And that's not being critical of Apple. You can't every generation have generational jumps of like 50 to 100% of performance improvement. It just doesn't happen. A lot of Intel generation jumps are like 30%. The last desktop ones here, the 14 gen, were like 10%. That's normal. So that's fine. But everything else between the battery life and everything runs so well. If you have an M1, you're like, why do I need the M3? It only matters if you're pushing your laptop 100% of the CPU and GPU every day for extended periods of time. If you're that person, yeah, extra horsepower would be nice. If you're like, I use it for school to browse the web and work in Microsoft Office and, go on my Instagram, you absolutely do not need the M3. The other problem that Apple has is kind of what we're just talking about with Surface innovation. They don't do it on the MacBook Pro. Thing doesn't even have a touchscreen, right? The biggest innovation was them undoing mistakes that they had for a couple of years, like the touch bar or getting rid of MagSafe. Now they've fixed that stuff. But literally, other than that, the display now is brighter. It goes up to like 14 or 1600 nits. Credit where credit due at 120 hertz refresh. That's really impressive. So it's a really nice display. Again, though, 1600 nits of brightness, like unless you're outside working on your laptop in the sun, and you do that regularly. I don't mean it that one time you need it. If you're doing it regularly, that's the only reason you'd want that. You're never going to run that bright indoors, right?
Yeah.
You blind yourself. It's absurd. So, but they have this problem where they're not innovating on the device itself. So there's like nothing new. It looks the same. It's going to perform basically the same. I was on Schwab TV a couple of days ago talking about this with Apple. Like the iPhone 15 actually brings a lot of small but kind of significant changes, right? The titanium, it's now lighter. The Pro Max version has that new telescope lens on it. That's a faster processor, blah 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 blah. But even if you watch a lot of reviews, they're like, but after a few days, if you're coming from like the 13 or the 14, it feels exactly like that device
Mm.
because the home screen looks the same, your apps look the same. Yeah, and it's always funny when Apple's like, the A17 now is like 30% faster. It's like, yeah, for what? Opening email and Instagram on your phone? Like, how much are you like, if you're gaming, sure. But if you're just running your regular apps, a phone call comes in, like, oh my God, that new A17 chip made that phone call faster. Like, no one says that. So it's kind of when you, I've had this experience with upgrading to iPhones. You get the new ones and you're like, oh my God, it's so cool. You love unboxing. Then you start using it, like, yeah, it doesn't really feel any different. So it's
Yeah.
like,
It's the
but
biggest
that's
scam in
Apple.
tech history.
So, but they're having issues too with this. Their MacBook sales aren't amazing. It's kind of flattened out. But that leads us to Nvidia and AMD. So, a rumor came out that both are going to get into ARM. Nvidia technically has always been there with ARM. They did, of course, the RTX processors years ago for Windows devices, and they've had experience with ARM and server stuff, I believe. And they actually were trying to buy ARM Limited like a year or two ago in a deal that was pretty close to going through, but the last minute didn't. So now they are looking to get into the business, supposedly. They have experience. I think they can do this. They have the team to do it. Plus, they have all that GPU technology. And that's where I think they would fit in. I think if they get into this, they're going to look to get into like high-end gaming laptops that's paired with their GPU. Hopefully, a new GPU that's more optimized for these scenarios. But that's like a high-end kind of gaming workstation with a beefy RTX type GPU thing. Now, does that bother Qualcomm? As far as I can tell, no. When I talk to them about that, they don't seem bothered because they're not going after that market. I don't think they necessarily have the IP to go after that market. And what I mean here is again that GPU stuff, right? NVIDIA, they have an amazing grasp on GPUs, RTX technology, DLSS, all that kind of stuff. That's their bread and butter. So if they compare that with the processor and go after gamers, that's a market that Qualcomm is not trying to go after, and they don't really have plans to go after. They're going after thin and lights, convertibles, laptops up to like 15-inch, basically, that don't need a strong GPU. Although they have a strong GPU, but not like the RTX 4000 series GPU, right? Um, they want mobile 5G, this kind of stuff, smaller devices, all these kind of things. That's where Qualcomm's going after, and that they're focused on. And when I talk to them, they're like, if Nvidia comes in, they can have that market with the gaming and stuff like that, because that's not going to be us. So that's what I think Nvidia will do. Now, this is not planned to supposedly to 2025. It's not easy making these chips. It took Qualcomm with the Nuvia team a couple years. I believe it was almost 3 years to, bring this out. So it's not, and they hired some of the best engineers, ex-Apple ones. Some of those engineers actually worked at ARM. So they have a really long pedigree in chip design. But I think NVIDIA has very deep pockets. Their stock has been incredible. They can absolutely do this, and I hope they do. AMD, though, I don't know what that's about. Now, I know like I've been sour on AMD here and there. They're great in desktop, they're great in server. They've given Intel the competition that they absolutely need and deserve. They've done incredible stuff. They do more with fewer cores than Intel, often more efficient using drawing less power, especially I'm talking here in desktop, and 9 times out of 10, 150 dollars cheaper than Intel. So that's great. Them getting to ARM though, this is what I have issue with. Qualcomm, decided to make the Nuvia stuff and next gen chip. Qualcomm's been doing ARM like that. That's all they do, right? So and not only do they do the processor, and they have experience there, but they do the entire SoC. They do the audio stack now. They do the camera stack. They do the NPU stack. They do their own GPU, right? So they have the whole package, which is why they can do all this stuff, which is pretty wild. So they have the experience with ARM, and then they bought the team from Apple to make these next gen chips. I just explained how NVIDIA has a history with ARM. They made chips in the past. They still are working with ARM. They look to buy ARM, and they have those strong GPUs. So I don't think it'll be a challenge for them, but I think they're absolutely capable of doing it, especially since they have such deep pockets because of their stock. AMD's stock is like, they haven't had the market impact, I would say, that I think people think that they've earned. I've said desktop, they do pretty well. Servers, they've done really well competing against Intel. But when it comes to laptops, they're still far behind. And you can say that's unfair because Intel pays for R&D, they cut their prices, they make deals. And yeah, that's the game, right? That's the game. Also, if you often pair with, partner up with Intel, they'll do a commercial. You still see commercials on TV for Intel, and then they'll usually show up like a Dell XPS. AMD doesn't do that. They don't have those pockets to do it. They also have, as far as I remember, no experience in ARM, none, which means that they have to go and buy that talent. They have to go and create a team to make that happen. So you have to go poach people. You may be able to get some, but building a team from scratch and then going into ARM when you've had no experience with it as a company, that's not easy. And I don't know if that's something like, they're saying 2025 or 2026. I don't know, man. I don't know if they can pull that off. Should they pull that off? Yeah, they probably should because, the industry seems to be going towards RISC processors and ARM, and they just haven't. Intel now is in full on. All right, we're back. We're going to be competing stuff mode, and they're doing really well with. Meteor Lake's about to come out. Their next gen stuff. They're still extremely fast, and they have their whole roadmap for nodes that I think is really going to be competitive for AMD. So I'm sour here on AMD. I don't think they can necessarily pull this off. They also just don't have the pockets to do it. They're not nearly as big. I mean, Intel. I think it was someone was telling me like Intel has more marketing people than AMD does engineers. Like they're not even close to the size of being the same companies. So I think it's a tougher challenge for AMD. But get NVIDIA in there, I think it's going to be pretty wild. I don't know. What do you think about all this stuff? You think the industry, specifically Windows, is going to move towards ARM? It won't replace x86, but it'll become more of a mainstream thing?
Yeah, 100%. I think Microsoft sees this happening too. This idea that this next generation of computing is led by ARM, I think, is a very real thing that we're going to see happen. Obviously, Intel will be there, as you mentioned. x86 isn't going away. Intel will compete. And I think they'll do a good job. I think if anyone can compete, I think it's Intel. Intel had a serious wake-up call when Apple moved to the M series stuff, and we're only now just sort of seeing the results of their response to Apple's switch to Apple Silicon. And that's going to benefit the P&C space, and obviously it equips them quite well to compete with whatever Qualcomm's cooking up and whatever other ARM chips appear over the next handful of years. I think you're right about Qualcomm probably being the best at this, but competition is good.
Yeah,
I love to see NVIDIA and AMD are at least considering ARM chips. Obviously, MediaTek's there as well. I don't know how good MediaTek are at this as of right now. I know usually their chips are behind.
They're pretty good. So, by the way, this all comes back to this idea that Qualcomm had an exclusivity deal with Microsoft for ARM chips and Windows, and that is set to expire in 2025. So I think there's a market momentum here. But that's also, we can't ignore, supposedly a big part of why. And you're right, MediaTek would be another company that would get into this.
Yeah. So, yeah, I fully think that the next year or the next couple of years are going to be quite ARM-centric. And, I don't know how Intel's going to feel about that. Obviously, Microsoft and Intel are very close partners, but it would be stupid of Microsoft to not acknowledge that Qualcomm is sort of stepping up here and doing a lot in regards to chip innovation. It's a shame for Intel because obviously if Intel come out with a chip like what's coming with their Intel 14th gen 2 years ago, this would be a very different conversation. I think what we're having today, we would be talking more from the perspective of Qualcomm has this chip, but who cares? Intel's got Intel's 17th gen, which is awesome. It's like
And to be fair to Intel, and I've said this before, they're not reacting to Apple. They've had this concept and design on the books for 5 years, I believe. It was just
yeah,
part of their roadmap. They just decided to concentrate on performance first, and now they're pivoting towards efficiency. It just happened to be that Apple at some point came out with their own chip, so they're not reacting to it. Um, but yeah, Intel is pivoting again. You're right about how to come out early. You can say that about any technology, of course, though.
yeah,
I will say though, don't forget, Intel's Meteor Lake chips will launch significantly earlier than Qualcomm's efforts,
that's
and
true.
that matters too.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So,
You
and
know,
I'm curious about the performance. I think Meteor Lake will be pretty close in some ways to Qualcomm's. It's going to be really interesting. I think Qualcomm will win on efficiency. Don't get me wrong. Maybe even on power, but I don't think Intel is going to be like miles behind, kind of how they feel like they are now. I think Meteor Lake is going to really kind of make up. And I always talked about this, diminishing returns. It's like all day battery life. Like I get 30 hours of battery life on my laptop versus I get 12 hours. Like 30 hours is great, don't get me wrong, but for most people, 12 hours would be pretty awesome too, because you're going to want to come home at the end of the day and you're going to want to plug it in. If you come home at the end of the day and your laptop is 39%, and that could last you another day, how many people are going to be comfortable mentally with the idea that your laptop is at 39% when they could be charging it to 100%, right?
yeah,
Like I know I couldn't do that. Like the only time I've had to do that is when I literally forgot to charge it. And then it's nice. It's great. It's like, oh, I will survive here, but you still have that anxiety going on. But I don't know many people that would come home at the end of the day with 39% battery life and then risk the next day. um, so I feel like diminishing returns here. If they can hit like 12 hours of solid, like actual battery life, then I think the distinction between efficiency here just becomes not as much of a selling point.
my favorite thing about what's coming up with the whole ARM stuff is given assuming everything falls into place and we do see more OEMs adopting ARM chips, and it's not just a special device once a year, the ideal scenario is we see a Dell XPS with Intel and ARM, we see a Lenovo Yoga with Intel and ARM, we see a HP Spectre with Intel and ARM, right? It shouldn't just be this special line, it should just be normal. If we do see that and it starts to become the norm, the what's going to start happening is customers are going to get annoyed at developers for not supporting ARM on Windows. Looking at Google particularly here, Google obviously is the biggest sort of app developer on Windows with obviously Chrome OS, the Chrome web browser, and they have refused to support Windows on ARM. They support Mac on ARM, they support Chrome OS on ARM.
And
they're not giving Windows anything. They're not budging at all. But if this Windows and ARM thing takes off and becomes normal, Google won't have a choice if they have half of their users complaining that Chrome isn't supported on ARM. And actually, that might benefit Microsoft, because then obviously they can advertise that Edge as being more performance and more energy efficient because it's not running in an emulation layer. And then obviously there's Firefox, and I think Opera, I don't know if they've announced it yet, but I've heard Opera is planning to bring their browser to ARM as well. And Microsoft is working with a number of top Windows developers to ensure... Oh, Dan has hung up. Did you decide to kill Skype for some reason?
I meant to hit the turn the camera off. I was gonna go let my dog in, and I hit the other button. Let's just say that.
Okay, don't
Anyways,
worry.
I'll be back in a second.
Yeah, I don't know what I was saying. Oh, yeah, Microsoft is working with the top developers, well, air quotes top developers. I don't know how they consider a top developer to be top developer, but they're trying to work with the hundreds of top developers on Windows to get them to move to Windows and ARM. And I think we are starting to see it happen. Adobe's committing to Windows and ARM. DaVinci Resolve has been announced as coming to Windows and ARM. Those are big apps, committing to this. Well, Firefox, I think, is already supporting Windows and ARM. We've already got Spotify there. WhatsApp is bringing its Windows app to Windows and ARM. Office is there more or less anyway. Most of the inbox Windows apps are there now as well. So yeah, it's happening. Like
I've had this discussion with I did tweet out some fun stuff this week with Apple, basically comparing the M2 and even the M3 to what Qualcomm announced. And I was, there's two things that really bother me right now with ARM, and part of this is a messaging issue and stuff. But like one is Like there are no apps available, and that's just not true. Now there's a couple of things here to unpack. One is like, are the most used apps in Windows available in ARM? And that's an important thing because there literally is a list of like 10 to 20 apps, and I would say even 20 is too high. Most people are going to stick to like less than 10 apps on their PC. One of the number ones apps used on a PC is the web browser. So yeah, you have Edge and Firefox already, as ARM. Chrome could be ARM. Google is literally just like, we're not going to support it. It's not like it would take them resources. They could just do it. They just refuse to. But you're right. If enough market pressure comes on them, they will cave. After all, most people use Chrome on Windows. It's a weird thing that they don't support it, but it's like, I mean, it's Windows regardless. Why do you care about the processor part? But anyway, so the browser, I remember Microsoft saying that up to 50% of app usage on a PC is the web browser. So that's a lot of it. You just mentioned Office. So you have Office, you have OneDrive, you have Skype, you have Microsoft Teams. All this is ARM. You have all the inbox apps are ARM. You have Spotify. You have Luminar Neo, which is a photo editing app. You have Photoshop. You have Lightroom. And Adobe has said they are converting the rest of their apps in their subscription service to ARM. It is taking time for them, but they got the two big ones out there, I would argue. DaVinci Resolve is coming out in 2024. That's huge because that's a really good video editor. A lot of people swear by. That's also free. And then, yeah, you have all your messaging apps. You have Netflix, you have Disney Plus, you have Twitter, you have all that stuff in the Microsoft Store is all optimized for it. So I would argue, like, Amazon Prime Plus, like I can keep going on. There's a ton of like mainstream apps that if you think about what people are doing on the class of PC that Qualcomm is targeting. Again, I mentioned they're not going after gaming laptops. They're not going after heavy workstations. They're going after thin and lights. What are most people doing on thin and light laptops, right? They're doing office work. They're running a web browser. They're watching movies. They're watching Amazon, Netflix. They're listening to Spotify, using Skype, using WhatsApp, using Telegram. Telegram runs really well. There's Unigram you can run as a UWP, or you can just run Telegram desktop as a PWA, which is really, really good. So there's a lot of this stuff that's already done. The other misconception I keep running into from people, and it's mind blowing, is like this idea that there are a lot of x86 apps don't run.
Right. Yeah.
And that was true early on, like 5 years ago, that you just couldn't run some because of the x64 support. But now there's no issue at all. I've never come across an x86 app that doesn't run.
It depends on how complex the app is. There are certainly some that will not run well.
Yeah.
But they're few and far between.
And that's been the issue. So then you get into the emulation part. There's a performance hit. I mean, Rosetta has a performance hit too.
Right.
You read all the literature about it. It does have a performance hit. The difference is M1 was such a fast and powerful processor, you didn't feel it, comparatively. The Snapdragon 8CX, as great as it was, felt like, especially the Gen 3, which was a large jump in performance, but still felt like an 11th gen Core i5 U series chip, which is fine. When you're running Windows and Windows apps and Office, all that other stuff, it ran great. That's why so many of us liked it. But as soon as you threw the emulation stuff into it, now the performance is going to drop down to, I don't know, like an i3 and less. Like now you start really feeling that performance thing. So that was a problem. And that's something that people felt, especially if you're like, my browser of choice is Chrome. You can run Chrome, but it's not going to run as efficiently. Now with Snapdragon X Elite, the chip is faster than M2. So, like this is beating like Intel Core i9 H series, right? Like, so when you throw in the emulation stuff, running those same apps in those cases, what's the worst the performance is going to be? Like a Core i7 P series? Like you're not going to notice that, unless you're like, I run Elements on my ARM devices, and that's not optimized for ARM. I'm talking Photoshop Elements. It runs fine. I've had no issue with it. So like, I can only think having that much brute force power is going to kind of make up for a lot of that. The other thing I want to talk about too, and this is also kind of confusing, is there's quite a few things. The TDP. So we posted the benchmarks. Credit to Qualcomm here. They didn't just post like weird graphs on stage. and be like, take our word for it. They named the competing processors right on stage. Press had it in advance too. They told us the benchmarks that they were actually running to get those numbers. This is more than what Apple's does, by the way. Apple just puts a graph up and it's like our leading competitors of fastest processor. like, what is that? Um, and then they invited press on Friday to a session for benchmarking. They walked us through, and I have the sheet. Actually, yeah, it's right here in front of me. I actually still have the sheet here. They handed out this sheet here, and this has all the tests. Sorry for the bite mark. That was my cat. But it has all the benchmarks. It has the version number of the benchmark. It has the method, so average of 3 iterations. So they ran them 3 times in a row. They give the expected score range because if you run benchmarks enough, there's a range. So they gave the bottom and the top range for those. And then they had 2 devices, config A and config B. One was labeled as 23 TDP. The other one was 80 watt TDP. And so the 80 watt had a fan in it. The 23 watt had a fan too, but the engineer told me it doesn't actually need the fan. It just has one here, but the fan never came on. The 80 watt, you did hear the fan on when you're running like something like Cinebench, which, yeah, it runs your CPU, either multi-thread or single at 100% for like 10, 15 minutes. It's a pretty brutal test. But they gave us all that information, and then we got to go look at all the laptops, and we couldn't hit the button, but the engineer would hit the button and we can watch the benchmarks run, and we can do that as many times as we wanted. And we can take pictures and do whatever we wanted. Now, I don't think Qualcomm is lying here. I really don't. And I was told through their PR, everything they had to say on stage and everything they've been putting in slides and claiming goes through their lawyers. They can't just get up on stage and be like, we're faster than Apple's M2 and not have it be true. Because if you're then an investor in Qualcomm, you could claim deception, and that's a big thing. That's a grounds for lawsuit against the company because now you're deceiving investors about what your product can actually do. That's not a trivial thing. So yeah, I actually believe them. I saw all the benchmarks running. We know what it can do. It beats the M2. And man, I had some like Apple fans that were just like making some of the craziest excuses. Someone told me benchmarks don't matter because they're synthetic and because it doesn't account for the operating system. It's real world that matters. And I always say real world does matter. I always put in my reviews, how things actually run and feel. But like this idea, like I'm going to sit in front of every app as I launch it with a stopwatch is like stupid. But benchmarks, so they were like Cinebench isn't even optimized for Apple Silicon. And it favors Intel and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, that was true for the version we didn't use. So Cinebench came out with Cinebench 2024, which is what was used. And guess what? It says right in the press release for that, they've optimized it for ARM Silicon as well as Qualcomm's chips. And that's why they used it. So no, a company like Maxon, that's their bread and butter. They just make benchmarking stuff, right? When they designing this stuff, the idea is, yeah, you want to remove elements that, like the operating system. I don't even know what that necessarily means, because it's like with the animations, does that matter? But no, it's absolutely fair to compare. I think it's funny, like I told this guy, I was like, so you're saying we can build all these expensive chips with this insane technology at like the 3 node and all this, but we have no actual way of benchmarking and comparing them? That's your argument. Science hasn't figured that out yet. We know how to make the chips, but how to measure them? Like, what is this? Quantum? Like, come on, get out of here. I had another person go like, the Snapdragon X Elite shouldn't go up against the M2 or M3. It should go up against the Max. And this is the rationalization. Because the Snapdragon X Elite has 12 performance cores and no efficiency cores. It's an interesting architectural design. It's just 12 performance cores. Huh. And you know what else has 12 performance cores? The M3 Max. Dun, dun, trump card, game over. Those should be compared. Here's the thing, though. The M3 Max actually has 16 cores because it has 4 efficiency cores. This person, for whatever reason, decided those 4 efficiency cores apparently run at 0 megahertz and don't do anything. But I'm here to tell you, when you run benchmarks, It absolutely uses those cores to acquire that score. It's not Qualcomm's fault that Apple didn't put 16 performance cores in and put in 4 slower cores for their architecture. But I can absolutely tell you, it's a 16-core chip, and when you do a multi-thread test, all 16 of those cores are being tested. So no, that's not a fair test. Also, you have to understand, the TDP thing, getting back to that was the other thing, 23 and 80 watts. People are like, oh, 80 watt, that's a lot of draw. Like, that's crazy. Apple doesn't do that. Here's the thing, and this is a big asterisk here. Ready? That's not the chip TDP. That's not the power that the chip is drawing. That is the device TDP. And if you're wondering what the difference is, a device TDP is basically the thermal envelope engineers need to aim for heat dissipation of that device, not the power draw of the device. So what's the actual power draw of these chips? We don't know. We don't know. Qualcomm has not actually told us yet. That's the answer to that. So you can't say like, well, the Elite X at 80 watt is still way more inefficient than Apple's, blah, blah, blah. Because we don't know that. It just means at 80 watt, you got to have enough cooling power to cool what is 80 watts of heat output, heat dissipation. And that's where the fans come into play. That's what that means. So that's not a fair comparison either to compare that. In terms of efficiency, we're going to have to just do straight up battery tests and see how they are, as well as I'm sure we'll learn about the chip TDP at some case. From what I understand, the chip TDP, though, is variable, kind of like Intel's. That means, OEMs making a laptop can power it down, power it up, depending what the kind of device. Do you want a fanless closed system, or do you want a system with vents on it that has a fan that comes on occasionally? Don't forget the MacBooks have fans in them. They don't come on often, but they have fans. It's active cooling versus passive. So like, all that needs to be taken into account. But this is going to allow OEMs to make a Surface Pro 9 or Surface Pro 10 completely closed, or maybe just some open venting. But you can also make a 15-inch laptop that just goes crazy, pushes the chip to the max, and has cooling with it, and you get like the max performance out of it. That means every Snapdragon X Elite device technically will perform differently. But that said, that chip is still considered to be one SKU. How many does Apple have? Well, with M3 currently, you have 3 SKUs, the M3, M3 Pro, and M3 Max. And you maybe ask, well, how? That's because Apple scales up their chips by adding more cores to them, what I was just discussing, right? So the M3 only has 8 cores, whereas I think the M3 Pro has 12. I forgot now the numbers. And then the Max has 16. I think that's what it is. It's 8, 12, and 16. And some of those are efficiency cores. That's how Apple scales the chips. In fact, if you look at their press images, they literally have a small chip, a medium chip, and a large chip. They're physically bigger, right? Qualcomm hasn't done that yet. They have one chip. That's why the platform is called Snapdragon X. Elite is one version of that. Could they do Snapdragon X Ultra? Yeah, they could go from 12 cores to 16 cores. It's not hard. I mean, there's nothing like theoretically that is impossible by that. They make a bigger chip. They add more cores to it. It's going to require a little bit more power. They could also make a 20 core, all performance cores, make it even more powerful, call it the Snapdragon X Max. We haven't seen that yet from them. They announced one chip. Likewise, they could scale down. They can go from 12 cores to 8 cores to 4 cores even. Bring down that price point, bring it down for, slow devices that don't need all that speed. So that's currently the difference between Apple and Qualcomm when people are making these comparisons. There's a lot going on here that's very different. I also had a person just basically say like I don't know why you would compare directly cores anyway. Cores does not tell you the story of a chip's performance. It's an entire architecture, its memory, its bandwidth, the actual processor speed. All this stuff actually matters when you're calculating performance. So for instance, AMD's top desktop chip has, what was it? I think it's got 8 cores and 16 threads. And like Intel's has 24 cores, like way more cores. But that AMD chip, not as fast as Intel's, is pretty close to it, and it's actually cheaper and all that kind of stuff. So the amount of cores is not a direct reflection of performance. It's a consideration, but you can't just be like, well, that has 12 cores and that has 8 cores. Ergo, 12 cores is faster. It doesn't work like that, folks. There's a lot more stuff going on chips. So that's all I had to say in that rant. I hope, people can learn from this because I've seen, especially from Apple fans, perhaps not surprised. I know Apple has, I don't want to pick on them. There are a lot of smart people who use Apple products. No doubt about it. I just was not dealing with those people on Twitter this week. I was getting the people who have absolutely no idea what they're talking about commenting at me.
I
That was
think a
infuriating.
lot of Apple fans are a little bit salty because obviously the one thing that made Macs better than Windows PCs, the chip innovation, is no longer a viable sort of or a massive gap or step forward. The Qualcomm stuff is now competing with the Apple stuff, and they're trading punches, and that's good for the PC industry. It's bad news for Apple because now there's a it's no longer a home run for Apple. There are areas where the Apple chips are no longer the best in class. And so no longer can Apple come out on stage every year and go, we literally ship the best stuff. Because I'm sure they will still say it, but it no longer is true. And so Apple fans are going to be annoyed about that. And it's interesting. The Mac market share has sort of has climbed a bit over the last few years. I think it's around 20% now, at least according to some data. I don't know, but it hasn't taken over the world. The amount of people who switch from Windows to Mac, I think, is a small percentage versus the amount of people who upgraded from an Intel Mac to an ARM.
And the PC market has grown too, so it's all kind of relative.
Yeah, I don't think for Apple fans and Apple itself, I don't think Apple Silicon did what lots of people were assuming it would and take over like the world. The problem with Mac wasn't their silicon. I never had a problem with Intel Macs. The problem with Mac was Mac OS, which is still the problem on ARM Macs. It doesn't make a difference, and I think that's the case for most people.
Yeah, they don't have 5G in their laptops.
Yeah, or touchscreen.
Why?
Yeah, or my screen doesn't rotate 360 degrees. So, there's a lot of things in the PC space that the Macs just don't do because Apple chooses not to, and so that's their fault for limiting their market share on people who only want a boring laptop.
Yeah. I mean, and this gets back to the idea that while it's fun to compare to Apple's chips and trade punches, at the end of the day, Qualcomm's real competition is actually not Apple.
Right.
By the way, that was the other thing. Someone was like, Qualcomm's competition is not the M2 or M3, it's the M3 Max. I'm like, funny, Qualcomm told me it was the M2, but you know more. I guess. Random person on the internet. But yeah, their real competition's Intel and AMD, because you're right. I mean, if most human beings who are going to go buy a laptop are going to buy the laptop based on the OS that they previously have, shoot, they might even base it on the laptop if they had an Acer laptop and you're really happy with it, you might go take a look at the latest Acer laptop or Surface, right? Or HP. Like, that's usually how people start. Most people don't just feel like, all right, I've been using a PC for 10 years. Should I get a Mac or a PC next? Like, some people can pull that off. But like, if you're a PC user, I encourage you, go try a Mac. See how you feel on it. Like,
I've tried
besides the performance and battery thing, yeah, it's a learning curve, man. It ain't easy at all. Everything is different on it. Where's File Explorer? Where'd my file go? How do I open stuff? How do I install things?
How do I snap app? Not even Windows snapping is a thing in macOS. People on Twitter go to me, yeah, just buy this app and it gives you... I'm not buying anything. I just spent $1,200 on a laptop. It should support snapping.
Yeah. So it's like, you can I did it once. I did switch to Mac. This is many, many years ago. This is before we were covering PCs and we're just doing Windows Phone. And I was, because I was given a Mac, and it was better than what I had at the time. And I did switch to it. And I got used to it, but boy, that was months. Yeah. That was months of work, And now if I go back to it, it's like still like a foreign language to me. I'm like, what? It's I have to relearn everything. And so you have that aspect. A lot of people don't want to go through that. It's not trivial. You just can't pick up a Mac. There's this idea that Apple's like, oh, it's just easier. It's easier if you know it. Yeah. But these things are so complicated now. It's not easier. And you have to learn all the jargon of Apple's ecosystem, right? All their named products and stuff like that. It's not easy. I would also say for a lot of people, you have an app or two that you really, really like. And then the question comes up, just like switching from Android to iOS or vice versa, is that app available on Apple? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and it's just like, that's a thing for people too, so most people aren't switching, but Intel and AMD are the real competitors.
Yeah.
the Apple stuff is just kind of fun to poke fun of. But it looks like now, so the M3 the M3 benchmarks on Geekbench 6 have leaked. And, going by that, it looks like the M3 beats the Elite X on single thread by a little bit, but I believe the Elite X still beats it on multi-thread, which again makes sense because there are more cores, and that is actually sometimes that can matter when you have more cores. Yeah, your multi-thread score tends to be higher, and so it beats the M3 that way. I think it will also beat it on efficiency because they were claiming against the M2 when running at the same peak performance as the M2, it was 50%. No, 30% more efficient. Yeah, 30% more efficient than the M2. That means when the M3 comes out, it has to be more 30% or more efficient than the M2 to beat the Elite X, right? Like that's kind of how that works, I think. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot going on there, but from what I recall, it's 15% more efficient, going by I believe Apple's numbers. So, but then you have the peak speed, so it's a little murky, but it's going to be very close. If not, I think the Elite X still is going to edge out a little bit. Like they really did a good job here. And they don't need to come out the gate beating Apple at everything, guys. Like they don't. This is their first gen. Like people are like, yeah, but does it come out to 2024? Apple will be on the market by then. We'll all be hearing about the M4 series. I'm like, true. But do you think Qualcomm is not going to like enter into a yearly update phase for their processors? Like, I don't know, like they do right now in their phones, because that's what they do right now in their phones, which means and this is why Qualcomm says 2024 is the inflection point for Windows on ARM. They didn't say for 2023. We're in 2023 right now. They said 2024 when their chips come out, an inflection point. And what that means is that things are going to start to favor ARM and Windows. That means we have 9 OEMs have committed to making devices with this new processor, including Microsoft. You have Microsoft, you have Dell, you have Lenovo, you have HP, you had there was the couple of the Chinese brands, Asus and Acer were there. Like it's the big players. So they're all going to be bringing laptops to market more. That's more than we've ever had before. And now you get into what Zach was hinting at earlier, which is you start getting that momentum going, and now developers have to start paying attention to it. And that's why it's called the inflection point. That doesn't mean 2024 Windows beats Apple. It means though by 2026, after we get into a regular update cadence, yeah, I think it's going to be a different story. So they also showed off 20. I forgot to do an article on this. They showed off 28 games running on the Elite X. Some were optimized and some weren't. They are working with studios. Unity is already optimized for ARM. But some of these games, they showed off like Minecraft, Minecraft Dungeons. They showed off just a World of Warships, World of Tanks, just like a bunch of. They did say they're going after casual gamers. They did make that distinction. So they want casual gamers. Their GPU can absolutely handle that kind of workload, especially like the Minecraft stuff for casual gaming. I would also argue this is where cloud gaming is like nice, right? You're never going to be able to really run on a thin and light like Surface Pro, the latest AAA first-person shooter. You can, though, if you have Xbox Game Pass or NVIDIA GeForce Now, you'll be able to run those through cloud. And you can be like, yeah, but you need an internet connection. True, but most online games today, actually, you do need to be connected to the internet. Ask anyone with an Xbox how they feel. Go unplug your Xbox from the internet, try to play some games and see what happens. So it's kind of, I find that, I don't know many people playing on their laptop a serious first-person shooter in the middle of a park, like outside. Maybe I'm wrong. I am older. Maybe I'm not hip with the kids. I don't see a lot of people outside with big gaming laptops doing serious gaming. It doesn't seem conducive to that. But for casual gaming, these laptops will be good. I don't know. What do you think about all this stuff, Zach? Are you excited about it? Do you think, are you looking to, pick up one of these devices when it comes out? And do you think Qualcomm is going to make a difference?
Yes, I'm very excited. Yes, I think Qualcomm will make a difference. And yes, I'm going to be waiting. I think my next laptop will be a Snapdragon X Elite based device of some kind. Ideally, the next Surface laptop or Surface Pro. But I guess we'll see what ends up shipping in the summer of next year, because that's when we're expecting these devices, right? Mid 2024. And this should ideally be timed with Hudson Valley. And I know Microsoft has teased it, and I've been hearing from sources that this next version of Windows will have some features that are exclusive to this new generation of NPU hardware, starting with the X Elite and ideally Intel 14th gen. Maybe, I'm not too sure about Intel, but certainly Qualcomm with its X Elite stuff. So if I want to be able to utilize every part of the next version of Windows, then I have no choice but to wait for the Intel, the Snapdragon X Elite hardware. I would be waiting for it anyway. I think that this is finally the Apple Silicon competitor that we've been looking for. This idea of a chip that offers all day battery life with great performance, with a great performance to efficiency ratio. Windows and ARM, I've always been a big fan of Windows and ARM up until now. But it's, the HCX Gen 3 I think is okay as is. I don't really have any complaints with the HCX Gen 3 as already, but the X Elite will have the power to sort of brute force simulation so that it doesn't feel like apps are being emulated for the most part. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, I want to see this chip in everything. I want every major sort of product line that an OEM makes. I want there to be an Intel and I want there to be an ARM option. I'm hoping, because I remember, Dan, we've talked about this before. I remember you saying AMD doesn't like it when OEMs recycle an Intel design with an AMD chip, and I sort of understand where they're coming from, but I don't think it matters. I think I don't want an OEM to say, "Oh, we didn't release this laptop with a Qualcomm chip because Qualcomm doesn't like it when we recycle Intel designs." I don't care. Put that goddamn chip in that laptop because I want to buy it. If the XPS Plus doesn't have a Qualcomm chip next year, I'm going to be annoyed.
To be fair, what they're really referring to is not so much that because the product doesn't stand out visually or it's confusing, to people. It's not really that. It's the fact that they would argue to get the most out of an AMD chip, you got to build a system from the ground up around the AMD chip and what it can do versus shoehorning it into an Intel design that their chip isn't being presented in the best light. And I think that is true. There is a little bit more flexibility, I would say, but that's kind of the point that they're making, and I think that's kind of accurate. So.
Yeah, but maybe Qualcomm doesn't need to worry about that as much because they are technically already building a more efficient chip. So if their chip can run in, if an Intel chip can run in an Intel design, then a Qualcomm chip can most likely probably run fine in an Intel design as well. Right?
I think we'll see, Qualcomm specific PCs. The reason is because the between the TDP and the heating and the performance and the battery, it gives OEMs new options in terms of design.
No, you're right. You're totally right. Like a thinner laptops, for example. I totally get that.
Yeah.
I'm all okay for a Qualcomm exclusive design. I just don't want an OEM to come out with an Intel laptop and say we didn't put Qualcomm in it because Qualcomm doesn't like that. I just like the XP. The example I keep coming back to is the XPS 13 Plus. That laptop, I think, is gorgeous. I don't care, the thinness of it already as is, I think, is amazing. That laptop with Intel 14th Gen and Qualcomm X Elite that's what I want to see, right? I don't want it just to be Intel 14th Gen or for the XPS for there to be two different designs, one slightly different, and it's like I just want them to be the same and just have the option between Intel and Qualcomm.
Yeah, and that also comes back to this idea of where did how much did Intel help Dell with the design of that laptop?
That I get, yeah.
And I could tell you Dell and Intel work really closely.
Yep.
So, Intel is not going to be cool if they worked hand in hand. I've said this before. Intel makes a lot of reference design laptops, and then these companies will license it, or they'll be building a laptop and they work hand in hand with Intel engineers to work on thermals and optimizations. Intel won't be cool if they do all that and then they're like, "Oh, we're going to put a Qualcomm chip in there." Intel will be like, "Yo, what the hell?" That's going to cause friction.
I do wonder if we're going to start to see this where Intel sneaks in with some sort of exclusivity deal with XYZ.
Sure.
And so OEMs,
it's all money.
Yep.
At the end of the day, it comes down to two things: customer satisfaction and demand, and simply money. If Intel comes behind the scenes and undercuts Qualcomm financially and chip deals, and gives R&D and advertising cuts and all that kind of stuff. If you're Lenovo, you have to make a profit. If you can increase your profit margin or have a better one with Intel over Qualcomm, like it's your actual fiduciary responsibility to make that happen, you know? So it's going to depend on people if they start using these Qualcomm chips, if they're like, this thing is awesome, it's game changing, and they see demand increase for it, then a company like Lenovo or Dell or whatever has a better argument going, up against Intel.
Yeah.
But, up until now, we haven't had that. There's been some advantages with Snapdragon, but not enough that an OEM could go back to Intel and be like, we're going to make some big changes now. I think they want to, because if not only does it favor the customer because of choice, it favors the OEM because of choice. OEMs don't want to be locked to Intel,
Yeah.
but if they're going to get the best deal through Intel, they're going to take it. But now with this competition,
locked to money.
Yeah, right.
I will say as well, to give Intel some credit, they are the only chip maker still pushing these sort of innovative designs in regards to foldables and, back a few years ago, dual screen. These more unique sort of PC designs is certainly always an Intel initiative. AMD isn't out there working with OEMs on that sort of stuff. And we've not seen Qualcomm doing it yet. Like, we've not seen any.
They're trying.
Yeah.
AMD is trying, but it gets back to the fact that, Intel dwarfs AMD in terms of size and deep pockets and all that kind of stuff. Like, AMD doesn't have the financial resources to do that, whereas Intel has whole labs dedicated to it.
But it's why every time you see a random, like, crazy or unique sort of PC design, it's almost always an Intel powered one, because more often than not, that OEM worked with Intel on that design.
Yeah, and Qualcomm will work with the OEMs too on this stuff, but I think it'll be but it still won't be at Intel level.
Yeah.
But we know, like I said, a lot of OEMs have committed to it. And I think we know why. I mean, the performance is off the charts, man. It's weird that Qualcomm is going from like the worst performer to the best.
Yeah.
Who makes that jump, right? Like, this thing beating like a Core i9 H series and even an HX series in some benchmarks is absurd.
Yeah, it is.
For those who don't know, a Core i9 HX is effectively a desktop processor that's been brought down and modified for laptops. That's different from the other, like the H series and the P series, which are strictly laptop processors made for that. HX is their top of the line, their best extreme processor for mobile. And the fact that Qualcomm is kind of coming out and beating some of that stuff. Now, granted, it's 13th gen, right? The Meteor Lake is going to do a lot for performance and efficiency. So it's not one-to-one, but that's still darn impressive. Again, like, for most people running thin and light laptops, if I could tell you're going to get like Core i9 performance out of something and get like double the battery life, you'd be fine. You'd be fine. You're not going to complain. You're not going to be like, oh, I still feel sluggish. You're not, So it's like, again, it doesn't need to be the best in the world, although in some ways, what Qualcomm is saying it is. So either way, I think for consumers, and we should mention the NPU. Qualcomm has a very strong NPU. It's 10 times as powerful as Intel's current one. I saw this live, by the way. It was one of the PR people, Sasha Sagan. He used to work at PC, I want to say, but he's well known in my industry, But anyway, so I was sitting down with lunch with him, and he had a Surface Laptop Studio 2, which has the Intel NPU in it, and then he had a reference design Qualcomm device with the X Elite in it. And on both, he had two different AI things running locally. One was, I want to say, is Lambda, the Lambda 2 model, which is Facebook, Meta owns it. And that's basically a chat GPT kind of thing. So you can ask it questions. It has 7 billion parameters in it, doesn't need the internet. And so he typed in questions for both. And it was whatever question I wanted. I could ask whatever I want to do. And then we hit enter at the same time. And we watch them generate. I mean, the Qualcomm one was just absurd. It's just instantly da-da-da-da. The Intel-based one was noticeably slower. Then we did one with it's one of the image generators. I always forget the name. It wasn't Dolly. It was, what's one of the other?
Midjourney?
No, it wasn't Midjourney. It was the other one.
I don't know anymore.
There's another one that someone will probably put it into chat. That's another popular. And anyways, it was that run locally. And it was like you hit enter, and within like 3 seconds, you had the image on the Qualcomm.
Yeah.
The first time we did it on the Intel, it didn't even run. So But once we got it running, it took, I want to say, just under 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Stable diffusion. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it was stable diffusion. That's what it was.
I would, I'll
It
say
was like under 90 seconds. Yeah.
it's quite interesting. Obviously, the Laptop Studio 2 shipped with an NPU. I think Microsoft severely oversold that NPU because I've been asking around about that chip, and people internally
Yes.
call it rubbish. Apparently, it can't even do audio stuff. The Windows Studio effects it can do is just the visual stuff, the webcam and stuff. It doesn't have any of the audio. Was it like voice
And
clarity and whatnot? I don't think.
and it's not an open API, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's
I've
not.
asked people this. In other words, if you're a software developer or you see those AI apps in the store, can those leverage that NPU? No, it can't.
Yeah, this is
Will
weird.
the next gen, will the next gen one? So the next gen NPU from Microsoft is also a massive jump. So it might actually come closer to Qualcomm's. I wouldn't doubt it. They're putting a
Oh
lot of
yeah, well, that's good.
emphasis in there. That's supposed to have an API too. But this question remains
Are they going to be
about
different?
yeah, this is going to be the kind of the issue with APIs and open
That's not
standards and
good.
stuff like
That's
that for
not good news.
NPUs. Yeah, so
There should be
but
a universal thing developers can target where if your device has an NPU, your
sure.
app can utilize it. This idea of it being a closed API or exclusive depending on the hardware is a road we shouldn't even be even considering. So, Mike, if you're listening, stop. But also, this is weird now because I've noticed this. My Robo and Kala, which is a Snapdragon 8CX based device, doesn't have Windows Studio effects. They're just not there. They're not in the
Which one?
OS. The Robo Kala, that sort of
Oh
cheap
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of two-in-one. It's a Snapdragon 8CX device. It's a real ARM device. It doesn't have Windows Studio effects, and I don't know why. These so I sort of asked around about this. Nobody seems to know why. Apparently, Lenovo removed Windows Studio effects from the ThinkPad X13, the ARM version,
Oh,
because Microsoft told them to. Apparently, they had released drivers, and Microsoft said no, please don't do that. And so, if you go and try to find that driver now on Lenovo's website, it says removed due to Microsoft request. That's weird, right? Like at this point, to my knowledge, the only ARM devices you can find with Windows Studio effects are Surface PCs. Um,
hmm.
is Microsoft trying to
Yeah, I gotta check
turn?
my HP stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
check.
HP has their own software
Right, I'm
suite that
talking
does it.
exclusively the built-in Windows Studio effects. I'm not talking
Yeah, I
about
know what you're
third-party
saying.
stuff. Like that
Yeah,
built-in OS functionality right now, at least, I think is Surface exclusive, and that's not been how it's been marketed. Like whenever Microsoft talks about Studio effects, they talk about it for PCs, and the ThinkPad X13s did launch with it, but it's been removed in a subsequent firmware update. So.
hmm.
Yeah, Dan, if you can check some of your Windows and ARM devices and see which do
Well,
and
you should
which
have told me
don't.
this before when
Yeah.
I just met with Lenovo last
Oh, I
night.
know.
So,
Damn it. Yeah.
I will see them again though in December, so it's
Ask them in December.
fine. I'll ask them in December. Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yeah, the NPU stuff. Yeah, it's gonna be critical to have that as an open API so that app makers can get access to that. Otherwise, the whole thing is kind of stupid. But yeah, I will say the AI stuff that Qualcomm demonstrated just not on the PC but also on phones for their new phone chip is really kind of cool. My favorite new feature that they have is we all are familiar with taking a photo and having it too wide, so we crop it. I crop all the time my photos. It was cropping in and all that. Of course, you can use the telescopic lens, telephoto lens, and get closer. That helps. But what they're able to do now is effectively a reverse crop, a zoom out crop. And what's neat about this, you may be asking, well, but if the camera didn't capture the image, how is it reverse cropping? And it's using dun 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 AI. Now, this is interesting because it's generating what it thinks via what do we call it? Like I can't think of the word right now. Uh, but it's generating what it thinks the rest of the scene would look like. You can kind of do this with some image generators now,
Yeah.
but it does on theirs and does it really fast. So if like you took a picture of like part of the beach, say, and you're looking out at the ocean, and maybe you missed something or you just wanted the shot to be wider, but you don't want to crop it in, it will just generate in the rest of the beach and the water. And it infers, yeah, it's going to infer from the image what was, and there's water there, it's water. There's probably water after on that edge, right? And it's same with like mountains or backgrounds. It's going to literally draw that in, but photorealistically, so you couldn't really tell. The thing is, of course, it's technically not a real image. because that stuff probably doesn't exist. But it got also like fill in for people too. It's pretty bizarre, but it works exceptionally fast. Um, it was really kind of impressive. They did a lot of live demos with that. In fact, I mean live in the sense it's like, go take a picture of that. And they would go take a picture of that and they'd come back and then they'd run it for you. And it was just like, oh, okay, wow, that really does work. Really, really kind of cool technology though. And it's very fast. They also have this ability that, when you use apps like that, it will watermark and like put in the file info that this was AI generated or modified. That's an increasing trend that we're seeing, this digital watermarking, so that you can investigate whether or not a photo has been manipulated. Even OpenAI is coming out with a model that can then detect, not even reading, it can just analyze the photo and be like, this was digitally modified, or AI modified. So that's going to become a thing. So people can't pass off fake photos and claim they're real, But, no one's going to be mad if you're taking a picture of your backyard and, you just drew in some extra grass or something like that. But obviously, if there's like something you're claiming is like, big news or something like that. So it's going to be cool. But yeah, a lot of AI stuff, and Qualcomm has been doing AI for like a decade, which is why they're so good
Yeah.
at it. That's why their NPU is so powerful. It's just because they've been doing this for a very long time. So, anywho, I think that's about it. A lot of stuff there. Hopefully, I answered most of your questions on the ARM stuff. If not, put the questions into comments. We'll start to get to those within a few minutes. But hopefully, that puts everything into context. There's a lot to learn. I will also say regarding all this benchmark stuff. Listen, this stuff doesn't come out for another 8 months, and that's unfortunately typical with Qualcomm. They do take. We've seen this all the times with the Windows on ARM stuff. It's usually about a 6 to 8 month lead between
Why does
announcement
it take
and
them so long?
I don't know, scale of production maybe. Maybe the devices aren't finished. Could be multiple things. But I will say, in a way that's kind of cool, my guess, and I'm pretty confident in this, just knowing in software and hardware development, in that 8 months, that chip is just going to get better. It's not going to get worse. And what I mean by that is like one of the reasons they don't want us to personally play with it was because they're worried, something where we break something or something would be damaged. I couldn't try like running x86 apps, for instance. Why? The drivers aren't ready. It's 8 months out. Like a lot of the stuff is not ready. The chip is ready. But a lot of the software, the drivers, the APIs aren't, optimized yet. That's still being worked on, and that's what they're going to be using this next 8 months for. So that's to answer your part of your question. I'm willing to bet that in that 8 months, they're not going to come out with worse benchmarks. I'm willing to bet that the benchmarks they're going to come out and will be even better than what we've seen already, because that's just how that works, right? Intel always updates and things tend to get better and a little bit more optimized and stuff like that. So I think those numbers will go up. I don't mean a ton, like it's going to be game changing. I just mean I think those scores will improve, even if it's slightly. I think things will get better. So keep that in mind, but we'll revisit that when, these devices start coming out mid 2024. I think fall 2024 will be the real critical phase, as Zach was talking about. We're expecting Windows 12 or, the next generation or the major update to Windows 11 will come out. You combine that with a bunch of new devices launching with NPUs, with ARM processors. It's a great holiday season push. You have devices now that are going to get 20 hours of battery life and all that kind of stuff. So I think even summertime might be pushing it. We may see one or two OEMs though. Some of them are going to want to get out early. And because whoever's earlier catches the
believe it or
attention.
not, I hear Surface want to be one of the first. I hear they might even be planning to announce their ARM stuff in like May or June. So
I could see that happening. Yeah. So they might not want to wait for the big OS update, because you can still just get the OS updates and it'll unlock features basically that the device can do. But then they'll do another push.
The schedule, I think, for the next version for Hudson Valley is it's supposed to be done in April. Like that's RTM.
Oh, interesting.
And I think there's a reason for that. I don't know if you remember, Dan, when you did the benchmarks or you got to sort of see those reference devices, were they running inside of preview builds? Do you know, like, was there like a watermark on the desktop? You probably don't remember. I'm pretty sure they were, because I have heard that these new chips don't run on the current shipping version of Windows 11. They need the newer platform advancements that are in the works for Hudson Valley.
Oh. Again, you should
Yeah.
have asked this when I was in Hawaii.
It
So I
doesn't
could have
matter. I mean,
asked them.
it's a minor detail, but yeah, I do think
Yeah.
when we do get this new hardware in the summer next year, it will be
Maybe that's why
running.
they didn't want us touching them.
It could be. It could also be a part of it. Yeah, but I do think this new hardware, when it does start shipping in the summer next year, it will be running Hudson Valley already.
Okay, so I take back the fall thing, the typical fall thing. All right, so that's
Yeah.
cool. So maybe it'll be even earlier. Yeah,
Obviously,
that's good.
schedules can
We'll be
change
learning.
and get delayed and stuff, but I think right now that's the
Sure.
plan. Yeah.
I think we'll be hearing more about this. I think a lot of companies will start pre-announcing some of this hardware in the coming months. We might even see something at CES. If not, I'm sure some companies will be starting to talk a little bit more about this stuff. But it's gonna be a good year though. I mean, for Windows, there's just
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah, yeah. I'm
between
excited.
this, the NPUs, new version of Windows. I mean, it's just like it's gonna be some really, really. We're gonna get the dream devices we've been wanting, and
Yep.
we'll have a good competition. It's gonna be nice. So, all right. I guess we can wrap it up. We can do a thing of the week? Got some time? Do you have a thing of the week? I don't know if I
Do
do.
I? I don't know if I do. Oh, Upload season 3 has started, which I've
Oh
been
yeah,
watching.
yeah. I did start watching that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've enjoyed every season of Upload, and this season is more of the same of that. I think it's a quite funny show with some serious undertones and whatnot.
Yeah.
I fully recommend it. I've recommended every season. I recommend this season. It's currently out. I think they're putting 2 episodes out a week every Friday.
Okay.
And yeah, it's awesome.
I fully endorse that too. I love the cast.
Yeah,
Brilliant
yeah, me
cast
too.
on it. It's great because it's a cast you've probably never seen before,
Yeah,
which makes it's fresh people that you can latch onto, and they just like I love all the characters. I think they're absolutely fantastic. The acting is great. It's absurdly funny.
it's so
But
weird.
you're right. There's always
Yeah, go on.
that serious stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were we gonna say?
The visually that show's quite interesting because it's I think it's quite a low budget show for Amazon.
Yes. Yes.
But some of the CGI is really odd. Like it's like it looks great for what it is. Like some of the stuff. Like there's a scene in one of the recent episodes where he's in a virtual world and he lays down and he's doing like
yeah.
snow angels, but in like Minecraft block grass
Minecraft
sort of CGI
grass,
stuff.
yeah.
I thought that looked great. And it's like this looks really good for CGI.
But then there's the cow.
Yeah, but then there's other elements of it that just really don't look good at all.
Yeah, the cow didn't look great, but that was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
Or the pig cancer,
That's
the pig
right.
tumor.
Yeah.
Like the inside jokes. I still love Oscar Mayer Intel.
Yeah.
In the future,
Yeah.
they've all merged.
Yeah.
Like, the show is just like we said that before. If you're into the internet and technology, this show has so many hilarious inside jokes that only like
Yeah.
tech nerds will
Yeah.
really appreciate. It's great, and yeah, I absolutely love that show. I'm glad it's kind of low budget too. I think this is the final season. I'm not really sure.
That'd be a shame if it is. I didn't know that. I'd like
Well,
this to
it
keep
might be
going.
planned. I'm not really sure. I got to check up on that. But it is, yeah, everybody should watch it. It's just it's one of those shows, especially in these dark times, where you watch it and you feel good after
Yeah.
you watch it.
Yeah.
You're smiling, you laughed, you feel kind of warm. It's got like this love story going on. I also love his ex-girlfriend. What's her name?
I don't remember her name either now.
The tall blonde.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she is so funny in that role. Like, she kills me. She's one of the best on this show. Like, she's really, really funny.
I love the ginger
But
AI. The ginger AI
the
guy.
Oh God, that guy is amazing too. Yeah, again, yeah, great
He has the
example.
best
Yeah, that
role
guy
as
is,
an actor in that show because he gets to be so many different characters but have the same appearance.
Yeah.
It's so good.
yeah, so there's a AI in there, and it's a ginger guy. I don't know if we're supposed to call him gingers or orange haired, but
Ginger.
he is
fine.
Oh, okay. Canceled. But he is absolutely amazing. Like, he is so darn funny. Everybody in that show is it's really good. Yeah, so go watch Upload on Amazon. I don't know if I have anything else outside of let's see, traveling. I still am loving. I was supposed to have the review done for the Spectre Fold. I still haven't done it. I did take it with me to Hawaii. It was the only computer I took with me to Hawaii because I wanted to put it through its paces as a actual review, how it's supposed to be used. It was incredible. It's the best thing. I don't know how HP is going to have to send security to come get it because, like, when I was on the airplane, and I was in Coach Plus, and that's how I fly. but it's a small little table, right? And this thing being a 12.5 inch laptop, I had no problem, of course, using it, right? And it was the perfect size, and I didn't feel cramped, but it was perfectly. But I got to my hotel, and all I had to do was open it, kickstand in the keyboard, and now I got a 17-inch computer I'm working on. And it was like, for the first time, I felt like, oh, I can actually work like this. Because as I mentioned before, I work on giant monitors, and no matter what the laptop is. Now, I used to, Zach knows I've used the LG Gram quite often. Um, the Gram 17, I should say. It's a great device, but it's hilarious because it's always a 17-inch laptop. Like I can't use that on the airplane. Like you can't bust that thing out. It's too big. And when I was in the press room, I would use it, but also meant everyone in the press room could see what I was doing because it's a giant screen. But with this, you can get either a 12.5 inch or a 14-inch technically when you stretch it out, or you can get a 17-inch. And that flexibility is for me for traveling. Nothing touched it. It worked flawlessly. I didn't have to carry the cable around with me, the charger, because the battery life is so good. I had never had any battery anxiety with it. The thing's been fantastic, absolutely amazing. So, yeah, but there we go. That's my kind of thing of the week, but hopefully I'll get that review done real soon. So, anywho, we'll wrap up the podcast now. If we do have any questions in the comments, please fire them off now. We'll stick around and answer those after the podcast. As always, we do record this every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern time now on our YouTube channel, and we may even shift it again. Who knows? Who cares? Anyways, it'll be on our YouTube channel or hit your RSS feeds or your podcast feeds. As always, you can follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino. I'm also on Threads at the same address. Same thing for Zach Bowden at ZACBOWDEN. You can ask us questions there or whatever. And as always, we appreciate you tuning in. Thanks a lot, and take care, everyone.
Wonderful. So, yes, if you have any questions, now's the time to put them in the chat.
That was a long podcast.
It was.
Yeah, someone said they got to check my coffee levels before I do these. Yeah, I was my brain is a little on fire today. I admit it. I'm very loquacious. It happens on occasion. All the chemicals in my body and the ones I take just happen to click.
Do you guys think the switch to ARM will also make OEM PCs cheaper? No. I think this is one
Not
thing.
now.
Not now, no. Yeah, the X Elite stuff that's just been announced is flagship high-end stuff. It will be
Premium.
sort of MacBook Pro pricing territory, I think, for a lot of laptops. We're not expecting sub 1,000 laptops, not with X Elite. That may be that's stuff that could come later, but not for next year.
Yeah, again, I think they're at 12 cores, 12 performance cores. They could drop down to 8 cores. It'll affect the performance, but it's still going to be a very, very good performer. Way better than what we have now. That will bring down the price. They might even try 4-core. I don't know. They could try that. Bring down the price even more. Maybe for something like a Surface Go, I think that would still be enough power. Yeah.
When do you think we'll see the first core PC device? This is a great question. The answer is I don't really know. But I have theories. I think we might see the first ones next year. And I think they might be tied to the X Elite. I think perhaps if Microsoft wanted to kickstart core PC stuff next year, X Elite PCs would be the first to ship with it, because you can ship core PC and legacy Windows side by side on the same Windows release and have them more or less be identical in regards to performance. In regards to functionality, right? They can look the same, they can sort of run the same apps and stuff. The only difference being core PC has faster updates, is more secure, etc., etc. And I think tying it with Windows on ARM might be a good way to sort of get that out the gates. This is just a theory, by the way. I haven't heard this is actually happening. But because of that, because core PC it's essentially just a different under the hood platform or layer, like the way the OS is sort of laid out on your disk drive is just different with core PC, but functionally they should more or less be the same. So yeah, maybe next year. I'm hoping next year, but we will have to see. because you can't upgrade to Core PC. Core PC is for new devices only. If you're going to be using Core PC, it's because you bought a PC that came with Core PC pre-installed. You can't use an ISO to install Core PC. That's not how it works.
Someone's asking what microphone I'm using. Let's see. I'm going to drop the link into the chat so you can go see it yourself. But it is the HyperX Procast microphone with a gold sputtered large diaphragm condenser, cardioid polar pattern, XLR connection. Yeah, it's their top of the line microphone, and it's sitting within what's called a Chaotica noise canceling thing, or that takes out the echo. So it's a good microphone.
When can we expect Surface Pro 10, 11-inch, or Surface Go 5? Which month exactly? I can't tell you an exact month, but the 11-inch Surface Pro probably won't be around until Surface Pro 11. So Surface Pro 10 is next year. That won't have an 11-inch option, and then the one after that, to my knowledge, will be the one, assuming it doesn't get cancelled, will be the one that ships with an 11-inch variant. So that could be late 2025, sometime in 2026.
When is the best time to pull the trigger on a new Windows desktop PC with all this new tech coming in the near future, and Windows 10 becoming unsupportable in 2 years? Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this question. I think for desktop, it's not quite as important. Actually, someone's also asking me about will they make like an NPU PCIe thing so you can add it to any computer? I don't know. It's a good question. I don't see why they couldn't or wouldn't. But I haven't heard of any such thing. But I think that would be kind of a cool idea. But I don't think it's when it comes to desktop, man, you can still just get like a Core i9 14th gen or AMD's top line and put an RTX 4080 in there, 32 gigs of RAM. Like you're gonna be fine with all with Windows 11 and whatever comes after and all that kind of stuff. If you're looking for a pre-built, obviously it's a little bit different. Or if you're looking for an all-in-one, yeah, it gets a little bit more tricky. I think the bigger question, the tougher one to answer is for a laptop, because some people are like, oh, I'm looking for a new laptop. I even have a tough time telling people like go buy a laptop now, unless like you really need it and you find a really great deal. And we'll see more of those coming up in a couple of coming weeks. Because the shift and it depends on your budget. If you're like, I only have $800, I don't think what you're looking to buy next year will necessarily impact that. This is for people who are like, I'm going to spend over $1,000 on a laptop. I think those people may be better served waiting for Meteor Lake, and you won't have to wait long for that. CES is coming up at the beginning of January. I can guarantee you Lenovo, Dell, HP, Acer, Asus will all have announcements around that for new devices and laptops. And those usually will come out within 2 months, 2 to 3 months of that. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer for certain SKUs and certain laptops, but some of those will be coming out pretty quickly. In fact, when I was in Malaysia, I was seeing those chips being made. So they're already stocking them up. So we may see those pretty quickly. But then if you want to be like, yeah, but what about the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite stuff? Yeah, Zach was saying maybe May, June, we may, if his thing about the Windows next update coming out in April or May, we may actually see those chips then coming out around that time too. So, to really get an idea, you'd probably want to wait till summer.
Yeah.
If you could do it, I would say wait for that. I think it's between the NPUs and the battery efficiency, both for Intel and Qualcomm, as well as the performance gains. And plus, there'll be some newer technologies, mini LED displays getting more popular, maybe more foldable stuff, more 5G things, like stuff like that. Like we're going to have more options, right? So I would personally wait for those. Unless you just don't care about that stuff.
Yeah. Will any of the new features on the Windows 11 2023 update be backported to Windows 10 versions that are still supported? Most of it won't be. I think one or two things might. And I think Windows Copilot is one of those things where they are looking at bringing it to Windows 10. Because obviously, the more users that is in front of, the better for Microsoft. So that's, I think, something they're considering. But other than that, no, I think most of the new features will be remaining exclusive to Windows 11. Someone also asked, when do you think they'll announce Hudson Valley? Is RT and is the April RTM for platform or experience too? April RTM is for platform, so that's germanium. That's when that gets finalized. Obviously, that's required for these new X Elite chips to start laptops to start shipping. They need that platform to be done. Regarding the experience on top, I think some of it will be there for the RTM, but some of it will certainly be later in the year. So I guess you could consider that another moment update for Hudson Valley, but I don't know the logistics and the exact details around all that still up in the air / a bit fuzzy to me. So I'm trying to figure out what the actual plan is for the schedule in 2024. Once I know, I'll be sure to put it all into an article on Windows Central. We'll talk about it more on the podcast when I can. Shopping for a replacement for my Duo V1. What is the best non-foldable out there that's not a Samsung Pixel or iPhone?
Maybe something from OnePlus.
Yeah,
I guess.
OnePlus 11 is a great phone.
Mean, unfortunately, you've eliminated. I mean, assuming you're in a Western market, you know.
Get a Motorola. What do they do these days?
Yeah, Motorola's kind of cool.
Yeah, you mentioned the Sony 1V or the Sony Xperia's. I've not ever used the Sony Xperia. I know they have crazy displays, like really high resolution 4K displays, which is stupid for a phone. But if you look up reviews on those, they're never very good. Those phones, there's always something wrong with them. So I don't know. I think OnePlus 11 is probably a safe bet if you're not looking for anything from Samsung, Pixel, or iPhone. Do you think Windows 12 will finally get rid of legacy code like the control panel, Windows Media Player, dialer, and such? It will certainly make strides to remove more of it. I don't know if it will all be gone. I don't know if it will ever all be gone, but more of it will be gone. Is Microsoft planning to release any more peripherals? They used to make the best mice and keyboards, and some really are due for an upgrade. I don't think so. I think Microsoft has reduced its hardware line, and that sort of killed off most of these peripherals. They might do like a keyboard and mouse every now and then, but there's no guarantee anymore. Microsoft actually killed off all of its Microsoft branded hardware earlier this year. Like that's all gone. So the Microsoft ergonomic keyboard, the Microsoft IntelliMouse, all of that stuff is dead. Which is a shame, and that was like really popular stuff. Well, popular in quotes. Can we expect Hudson Valley announcement earlier, given the possibility of it now launching earlier than fall? Perhaps. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how Microsoft is planning to unveil all this stuff. If there's an RTM in it, but to be fair, Windows 11 was also RTM'd in June. April, May, June. There's not much. No, May. No, June. It was early June. It was RTM'd. And they didn't announce it until after RTM. So that could that could happen again here, where there's an RTM in early April, but then they don't announce until late April. Right, so I think springtime is when we're going to hear about Hudson Valley. I think that's a sure bet.
Oh yeah, Zach, I did get to play with the OnePlus Open.
I've got one.
Oh, you got it? You came in?
I bought it. Yeah, it's nice. I do like it. Yeah, it's definitely better than the Pixel Fold.
It's way lighter.
Yeah. I like the shape of it better as well. I do like the slightly taller outer screen. Yeah, it's just, the only thing it's missing is wireless charging. Everything else it's got. Way better performance, way better battery life. Oh yeah, and the fast charging on this phone is insane. I had a OnePlus years ago that had fast charging, but the fast charging now is like it's another level. Sure. This is on what's it on? Let me see here, 1 second. Because I don't have battery saver on. Okay, my battery's on 25% now. I'm about to plug it in. Ask me in 10 minutes where my battery percentage is. And I'll tell you it's probably close to like 80%. Maybe not 80%, but getting up there. Right, a few more questions. Let's see. Apologies if I missed this earlier, but has there been any discussion on Qualcomm and motherboards becoming available for people looking to build their own desktop systems? There's not been any announcement from Qualcomm about offering its system on a chip as something you can plug into a motherboard or anything. I think you will see desktop PCs with Qualcomm in them at some point, but they'll probably be pre-built by OEMs, like a Mac Mini kind of thing. I don't think we're going to have any upgradable sort of traditional chips from Qualcomm. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think so. With the new Qualcomm chips X Elite being made, do you think that the ACX could be put into to future versions of Surface Go? No, I don't think we're going to see an ACX in the Surface Go. I don't know what the plan is for Qualcomm's older PC chips. We sort of tried to ask them that, didn't we, Dan? And they didn't really give us an answer.
We already covered this story. Wow, I missed a lot of news yesterday. We should have forgot to mention the X1 Fold 16 is now on sale.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize it was really noteworthy. I wrote that story too.
Well, I just saw it because it was tweeted by Sensel, who does the trackpad.
Yeah.
Well, and so I tweeted out, and I was about to send it to the newsroom, and I'm like, oh, wait, Zach already did it. Nice. Thank you, Zach.
You're welcome. Have you seen Parsley, by the way?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah,
it's ridiculous every time.
Yep. Live blogs for the win.
Oh, my Surface firmware updates post got tech meme. That's nice.
It's always nice. We got a nice graphic for our live blog. That's cool. Okay. We have a good team.
Someone's asking about Crash Bandicoot. Did you mention Crash Bandicoot? Because I don't know why they're asking us.
I have not mentioned Crash Bandicoot.
All right, Guy, you are getting in timeout because we don't care about Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah, do you think Microsoft should sell Xbox business? No. It's doing great. It's doing fine. They're doing absolutely what they should. They just closed a $69 billion deal. No, it's the thing is, it's like even Nadella acknowledges like Xbox is like literally their only true consumer product and access to it. So it gives them opportunities to bridge off of that. Like we've been arguing they should be making an Xbox phone for years. It's probably too late now, but it gives them opportunities to kind of do that. I don't see why. If it was like a huge loss leader for them and it just didn't make sense, but no, Xbox is associated with them. It's been a long time. No, I mean, people say with Sony too, but Sony PlayStation, but Sony does like 9,000 other things, right? They're a movie studio, a TV studio. They make audio equipment. Like they're all over the map, right? But then they have video games. So no one asked them, should they spin it off, PlayStation? So no, of course not. I think it's fine. What do you think is more profitable for chip makers like Intel, Qualcomm, pre-built or DIY? Oh,
pre-built.
Probably, yeah, pre-built, yeah. Well, wait, which is more profitable? Well, pre-built, you get mass.
Yeah.
Right? So you're going to have HP. We're going to build a new pre-built computer, a new all-in-one or whatever. We're going to need 10,000 of them. So you get that. When you have DIY, though, you can make the customer kind of pay the full price of that chip. Because when you're going to do 10,000, you're going to get a discount on those chips. Whereas you're just going to buy one, you're going to pay pretty much full retail or something close to it. So it depends. Depends how you look at it, I guess.
Do you have any sense of Windows 10 versus Windows 11 market share in the business world? Are IT shops holding on to Windows 10 and waiting to migrate to WinNext in 2025? Are businesses really missing anything? I'm pretty sure Windows 11 hasn't been too popular amongst the business world. I think most of them have clung on to Windows 10. And Microsoft knows this internally, of course, and I don't think they're going to keep pushing to try and get the enterprises to upgrade, because there's no reason to not have upgraded by now if they haven't, right? Like if they haven't done it yet, then there's no version of Windows 11 right now that is going to convince them to make a move. WinNext will be quite different. Hudson Valley, obviously, with all of this AI stuff coming, there's going to be a huge push on how AI enhances productivity, and obviously that might intrigue some businesses and enterprises who give out Windows laptops to employees. And I think it's not a coincidence that the next Windows release will be the LTSC release, the long-term services channel release of Windows 11 or Windows Hudson Valley, whatever they want to call it, which, of course, is another enterprise sort of focused thing, right? I think there's a reason that we're not getting that until next year, and it probably ties into AI. I think Microsoft will consider whatever version of Windows it ships next year as the version of Windows that's good enough to replace Windows 10 for enterprises. So... yeah, I think they're not too fussed about enterprises not upgrading to Windows 11. Of course, if an enterprise wants to upgrade to Windows 11, they're not going to say no. But I think next year's Windows release will be the one that they really want to push to enterprises a lot more.
And the ThinkPad Fold X16. The one I'd want would cost $3,689.
There's so many configurations of it. Like, I was quite surprised by that. Like the HP one, I think is just one, isn't it?
No, it's one SKU. One $5,000 SKU.
They've got...
but they charge you separate for the pen, and even the keyboard folio is an extra. Right. So it's $350. Yeah, for that. But yeah, you're right. You have 4 different processor choices. You have 16 or 32 gigs of RAM. Yeah. 256 up to 1 terabyte SSD, and you can get it in 5G.
I mean, it's a monster. So, you can spec it out like with full blown PCs, all the specs. Shame it's still 12th gen Intel.
I think it's the same thing though with the HP. It's the 9-watt processor. Yeah.
All right, last call for questions. If there are no more, we will be heading off. I feel like the Surface Update extension is to show their commitment to enterprises. They require longer support timelines. Am I too far off base?
That's true.
No, I think you're right. I think it certainly helps that it certainly helps how the Surface looks in the eyes of an enterprise company.
Yeah, I mean, it is important to note some of the biggest customers for Microsoft for Surface is enterprise. They do quite a bit. So, I mean, I've said it before. Our company, which has multiple thousands of people, has Surface Laptop Go 2 as its default PC for workers. So
yeah, is Microsoft making you work harder when with every day Microsoft is steering away from consumer markets in every segment, and you cover consumer stuff and not Azure? What's the future of Windows Central? Well, the beauty of Windows is it runs on lots of things. It powers everything from gaming to creativity. It runs on consumer-facing hardware released by all OEMs. There's a lot to Windows that is still very consumer-focused. Microsoft as a company, for sure, is a lot more enterprise-focused these days, but there are elements of Microsoft that are still very much consumer. Xbox being a prime example. Xbox content does very well on Windows Central. And will hopefully continue to do so. Also, when we, cover things like the Qualcomm Summit just gone, which is very much a Windows event now that there's Qualcomm PC chips, that was a huge thing for us. CES is where lots of consumer electronic hardware gets announced from OEMs like Dell and HP and Lenovo. That's all our base. Just because Microsoft is more and more of an enterprise company these days doesn't mean there are elements that aren't intriguing to consumers. Windows PCs and Windows as a platform, it powers a lot of things, and so we're pretty good, I think, in regards to to content we need to be writing about. This whole AI wave, Microsoft wants Windows to be the first OS to be a true AI OS. That's wild. That's going to be crazy. It's going to be Android and iOS, Mac OS at that, and so. Windows has got a lot to give, I think, still. So, will people who bought an SQ1/2/3 machine be hopelessly behind once the X Elite machines are out? I think you'll for sure probably miss out on a number of the next-gen AI features, because I don't think they're going to support older NPUs. I think it does literally require NPUs launching next year. But I don't think you'll be cut off from Windows VNext. I think you'll still get an upgrade to it. You just won't be able to utilize all this AI stuff. What is your opinion on these Chinese mini PCs like Minis Forum? They look great and prices are great, but I'm hearing different things in terms of support. Yeah, so go on, Dan.
I was gonna say I don't know if we had that one that was in. We had one in for a review, and we haven't run the review because it did come with some software that was sketchy.
Oh, really?
It would you couldn't change your defaults browser or search engine, and there was something. It was Rebecca Spear was telling me about it. And now they said that was like an older version. The new ones don't have that. They could send a new one and all that, but we just kind of, I think, moved away from it. That's my concern. Is there's a good chance. So if you're smart enough, you can get it and completely wipe it and install Windows again on it.
Yeah,
I would do that. I would not trust them. And it's not that I think they're trying to steal your data or anything. I just think they're going to install what used to be known as browser helper objects, BHOs, and all that kind of nonsense for collecting some marketing data. So get it, completely wipe it, and just install your own version of Windows on it.
I would say, I was going to say the same thing. So I reviewed a B-Link mini PC recently, or maybe not recently now, a few months ago. And I don't remember it coming with any egregious software, anything sketchy like that. But I'm still once I did the benchmark stuff, I blew that OS away and put a vanilla ISO Windows on there, just in case, right? But from a hardware perspective, they're great. I think they perform really well. It depends on what you're getting, but the one I had was an AMD Ryzen 7. 6600 or something like that. Performance is fantastic on them, and they run quietly and whatnot. Regards to support, that is obviously a big question. If you have run into any hardware issues, you may not be able to get much support, especially if you've got to send it all the way to China to get it fixed or whatever.
Right.
That's obviously a risk that you might need to be willing to take. The other one is obviously firmware updates. There are driver and firmware updates for some of these. I think they only usually get one. The one that I reviewed had one firmware update, and that's all it's ever had. And so, yeah. Okay, I think that's probably about it for questions. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Yep.
We will be back next week. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.